Hiraku wakes up in a comfortable rustic cabin to find a maid checking on him. He tells her not to call him master, preferring the title of village chief instead. As he heads toward the kitchen, another maid accidentally fires a magic blast that barely misses him while she tries to cook a red slime creature. Stepping outside into the bright morning, Hiraku greets a white-haired elf who notices he is up early. Moments later, an angel lands nearby to deliver a report, her clothes magically transforming into a revealing outfit, catching him completely off guard. He casually mentions having a dream about his past life, reflecting on how he never could have imagined living such a perfect, peaceful existence surrounded by various girls and farm animals. But this is just a glimpse of his future, a stark contrast to his past. In reality, his previous life was nothing but misery. After suffering from a terminal illness for years and being betrayed by the people around him, Hiraku finally passes away at the age of 39. His soul arrives in a dark cosmic realm where he is greeted by a glowing divine entity holding a massive club. The man introduces himself as the god of this world and reveals a shocking truth. The horrific life Hiraku endured was actually partially a mistake on God's end. Feeling responsible for the unnecessary suffering, God decides to compensate Hiraku by offering him a second chance at life in a brand new world. He promises to give Hiraku a perfectly healthy body completely free of illness. God then asks if he has any specific requests for his new life. Remembering a farming television show he used to watch endlessly while stuck in his hospital bed, Hiraku immediately requests to become a farmer in a remote area far away from civilization. Since agriculture falls under a different deity's jurisdiction, God takes a moment to consult with the farming god. Once he gets the green light, God grants Hiraku a special power called the omnipotent farming tool. With his request fulfilled, God sends Hiraku's soul down to his new world, telling him to enjoy his second life to the fullest. Hiraku regains consciousness and slowly opens his eyes to find himself lying on the rocky ground in a dense, sunlit forest. Taking a moment to assess his situation, he realizes he can move freely without any pain. Overjoyed by the feeling of a healthy body, he jumps to his feet and celebrates his newfound vitality. Ready to start his dream life as a farmer, he takes a look around and notices that the forest is incredibly dense, stretching out as far as the eye can see with towering evergreen trees. He briefly wonders if God placed him a little too far from civilization, but he quickly brushes off the thought and decides to focus on survival. Wearing simple villager clothes, he decides to test out his new magical gift. He channels his energy and thinks of a farming tool, immediately summoning a glowing golden hoe into his hands. Eager to test its capabilities, he swings the hoe into the ground. To his surprise, the magical tool effortlessly cuts through the hard earth and thick tree roots without causing him to feel any fatigue whatsoever. The tilled soil is perfectly fluffy and ideal for planting vegetables. However, he quickly realizes that before he can start farming, he needs to secure basic survival necessities like food and water. He spends some time wandering through the forest listening for a river, but all he hears is the rustling of leaves. He can't even find any edible plants. Realizing the danger of encountering monsters while wandering aimlessly, he decides he needs to establish a permanent base immediately. Catching sight of a massive ancient tree towering over the rest of the forest, he chooses the area around it as his new home. Knowing he needs water, he transforms his magical tool into 2 wooden dowsing sticks to locate an underground water source. Once he pinpoints a spot near the giant tree, he changes his tool into a shovel and starts digging furiously. The omnipotent farming tool allows him to dig endlessly without getting tired. He creates a deep hole but accidentally digs straight down, making it impossible to climb out. Realizing his mistake, he quickly digs a diagonal tunnel to escape and successfully strikes an underground water vein in the process. Thrilled with his luck, he secures his water supply and moves on to his next priority. Despite all the hard work, Hiraku realizes he doesn't feel hungry at all, likely another benefit of his new healthy body and magical tool. Still, he knows he can't rely on that forever. He decides to clear the area around the giant tree to set up a field and build a shelter. He transforms his tool into an axe and chops into a nearby tree. The magical axe slices clean through the massive trunk in a single effortless swing, sending the tree crashing to the ground. Amazed by the power, he switches the tool to a hatchet to strip the branches and peel the bark, processing the timber with ease. He then changes the tool into a hook to drag the logs into a neat pile. He plans to build a log cabin, but quickly realizes that constructing a proper house from scratch without nails or adhesives is way too difficult for his current skill level. Noticing the sun setting, he panics, realizing he needs a light source before darkness falls. He tries to summon a flashlight or a lighter, but the farming tool refuses to transform into complicated machines or items outside of its jurisdiction. Thinking quickly, he summons a magnifying glass and uses the last rays of the setting sun to ignite some wood shavings, successfully starting a campfire. With the fire burning, he hollows out a section of the giant tree trunk using a chisel to create a temporary shelter. Sitting inside his makeshift home, he drinks some water from a wooden cup he carved and realizes his eyesight is surprisingly sharp in the dark, either due to his healthy body or the light from the 2 moons in the sky. Feeling fully immersed in this new fantasy world, he rests for the night. The next morning, he sets out to clear more land. The continuous use of his magic tool eventually drains his energy, and he finally starts to feel hungry. Just as he considers venturing out to look for food, a terrifying giant rabbit monster with glowing red eyes and massive fangs charges at him from the bushes. Panicking, Hiraku swings his tool in self-defense, instantly decapitating the beast. Shaken but relieved, he decides to make the most of the situation by butchering the rabbit and roasting its meat over the fire. The meat has a strong wild taste, but he is just grateful to have a meal. Knowing that eating means he will eventually need to relieve himself, he uses his processed wood to construct a fully functional outhouse with a seat, an underground tank, and ventilation pipe. He proudly sits on his new toilet, happy to maintain some level of civilized comfort in the wild. With his basic needs met, Hiraku finally begins to till the soil to create a proper farming field. He uses a silver hoe to effortlessly create neat rows of dirt, but he soon encounters a major problem. He doesn't have any seeds to plant. He imagines growing potatoes, tomatoes, and corn, but without seeds, the fields are useless. He decides he will have to forage in the forest the next day. However, when he wakes up the following morning, he is completely shocked to find small green sprouts already growing in every single row he tilled. He wonders if the plants in this world grow without seeds, or if his magical tool somehow planted them based on his thoughts. He notices the sprouts look like various vegetables, including some bent green onions. Unsure of what exactly is growing but determined to protect his new crops from the giant rabbits, he spends the next few days working tirelessly. He uses his tool to construct a sturdy wooden fence around the entire garden and digs a deep trench on the outside for extra security. During this time, he survives by hunting down more rabbit monsters that try to attack him. He waters the mysterious sprouts every day using a magically crafted watering can, which seems to accelerate their growth significantly. Tired of living inside a hollowed-out tree trunk, Hiraku uses his accumulated timber and new construction knowledge to build a real log cabin. He digs a shallow foundation, stacks the notched wooden beams tightly together, and creates a sturdy roof out of tree bark fastened with wooden pegs. The finished cabin features windows and a proper door, making it a massive upgrade from his temporary shelter. Every day he enjoys watching his crops grow and feels incredibly motivated by his peaceful new life. But one afternoon, his routine is interrupted when 2 large black wolves with glowing red eyes suddenly emerge from the forest. Hiraku is initially terrified, but he notices the wolves are badly scarred, panting, and clearly not looking for a fight. Seeing that the female wolf has a swollen belly and is likely pregnant, he quickly places a wooden plank over his trench and invites them inside his safe zone. He offers them a large slab of raw boar meat from a monster he killed earlier that day. The wolves hungrily devour the food. Suddenly, the pregnant female wolf collapses to the ground in pain, signaling that she is about to give birth. Panicking, Hiraku decides the outdoor dirt ground is too dangerous and cold for the delivery. He carefully moves both wolves inside his newly built log cabin to provide a safe and warm environment. He lights a small bonfire near the entrance to keep them warm and decides to step outside so he doesn't interfere or stress the mother out. He retreats to a nearby cave and nervously waits through the night, hoping the wolves will be okay and worrying that another monster might attack them while they are vulnerable. Eventually, exhaustion takes over and he falls asleep in the cave. When he wakes up the next morning, he rushes back to the cabin to check on them. Peeking inside, he is relieved and overjoyed to see the mother wolf resting peacefully on the floor with 4 tiny, healthy black pups nursing by her side. The male wolf happily watches over them. Hiraku cuts up the best parts of his remaining boar meat to feed the new parents and celebrate the successful delivery. Initially assuming the wolves would leave once they recovered, he soon realizes they have completely settled into his cabin. Not wanting to kick a nursing mother and her pups out into the wild, Hiraku decides to just build a brand new cabin for himself. He completes his second log cabin quickly, adding a chimney and making it even better than the first one. He decides to name the 2 adult wolves Kuro and Yuki, and names the 4 pups Kuroichi, Kuroni, Kurosan, and Kuroyon. With the wolves acting as guards, hunting for game, and patrolling the area, Hiraku can finally focus entirely on his crops. Using a pair of gardening shears, he harvests his very first fully grown vegetable, a vibrant red tomato. He is thrilled to see that the magical sprouts actually produced real food. He offers some of the freshly harvested tomatoes to Kuro and Yuki, completely expecting the carnivorous wolves to reject them. To his absolute amazement, the wolves happily devour the vegetable. Seeing how much they love the food, Hiraku is filled with a massive surge of motivation to grow even more delicious crops for his new furry companion. Realizing he is going to have a massive harvest on his hands soon, he knows he needs to build a storage hut, craft more furniture, and create better tools. Looking out over his flourishing farm, his new log cabins, and his growing wolf family, Hiraku smiles, fully prepared to take on the endless work ahead to maintain his peaceful life. Meanwhile, deep in a dark cosmic void, God observes Hiraku to see how he is doing in his new life. God realizes that he made a terrible mistake by accidentally dropping Hiraku into the incredibly dangerous Forest of Death, a place filled with wicked monsters. He feels guilty for giving an innocent man a life fit for a sinner, but admits that interfering after someone has already started their second life is strictly against the rules. God just hopes that Hiraku survives, and that if his soul returns, he will accept a sincere apology. Down in the forest, Hiraku is completely unaware of the divine mix-up and continues to successfully use his almighty farming tool. He quickly figures out the mechanics of the magical hoe. He realizes that if he strongly imagines the specific plants he wants to grow while tilling the soil, the seeds for those exact crops magically sow themselves into the ground. He tests this theory by wishing for bean sprouts, and instantly, a small green sprout breaks through the dirt. Thanks to this discovery, he manages to grow a massive variety of vegetables, including potatoes, onions, tomatoes, cabbage, soybeans, and corn. The crops grow at an incredibly rapid pace, sometimes fully maturing in just a matter of days. However, this fast growth leads to some minor issues. Hiraku notices that some of his potatoes have turned green because they grew too fast and got exposed to the sun. Remembering from his past life that green potato sprouts are poisonous, he decides to play it safe and avoids eating them entirely. To prevent this from happening again, he uses his tool to meticulously mound dirt around the base of all the potato plants to keep them shielded from the sunlight. Feeling incredibly grateful for his peaceful farming life, he uses some spare wood to carve 2 statues of the gods, placing them in a small shrine to show his appreciation. One statue represents the farming god holding a tool, and the other represents the creator god holding a staff. Hiraku continues living his primitive lifestyle, cooking simple meals like rabbit meat and fresh vegetable stew in a large metal pot over his rustic clay stove. He learns that draining the blood from his hunted prey immediately makes the meat taste much better, and Kuro and Yuki also prefer their meat prepared this way. Even though his organic pesticide-free meals are healthy, Hiraku constantly wishes he had some salt to season his food. Wanting to improve his diet even further, he decides to plant a variety of fruit trees, including apples, pears, and persimmons. He knows that fruit trees take years to bear fruit, but he is fully prepared to wait patiently. Hiraku also finds another huge benefit to having the wolves around. Kuro and Yuki can easily navigate the dense forest without ever getting lost, which allows Hiraku to confidently explore deeper into the woods alongside them. During one of his scouting trips, he discovers a river with a small waterfall that sits at a higher elevation than his camp. He decides to dig a long canal to bring fresh running water directly to his farm. Since the work site is a 30-minute walk from his cabin, he builds a functional wooden outhouse right next to the river, so he doesn't have to run all the way back home for bathroom breaks. To speed up the construction of the canal, he transforms his farming tool into a wooden wheelbarrow. Because the magical tool prevents him from feeling fatigue, he can easily haul heavy dirt and rocks. He even tries giving Kuro a ride in the wheelbarrow, but he loses control and pushes the wolf straight off a small cliff. They both tumble into a heap at the bottom, prompting Hiraku to realize he needs to focus on clearing and fixing the forest roads before rushing his work. Back at his main camp, Hiraku clears more trees and expands his fields to grow a wider variety of crops. He plants rapeseed so he can extract oil, wheat to eventually grind into flour, and sugarcane to finally have something sweet to eat. His bean sprouts also fully mature into soybeans, but he gets disappointed again because he desperately needs rock salt to boil them into edamame. As the days pass, the weather gradually grows colder, and Hiraku notices snow capping the distant mountain. Realizing that winter is fast approaching, he tries to make warm clothes out of the giant rabbit pelts he saved. However, the pelts smell awful, and he worries they will rot, so he throws them away and prepares to just survive the winter by huddling near his fireplace. One day, while standing outside his cabin, Hiraku turns around and is absolutely terrified to see a massive dark blue spider with white striped legs and glowing red eyes sitting right behind him. Thinking it is a deadly monster, he immediately summons his magic tool and prepares to attack. The giant spider easily dodges his strikes and leaves behind a glowing white magical thread. Hiraku inspects the thread and is shocked to find a high-quality white handkerchief with a beautifully embroidered red monster border. He quickly realizes the giant spider is friendly and highly skilled at tailoring. He names the spider Zabuton and offers her the smelly rabbit pelts he previously discarded. Zabuton happily accepts the pelts and magically transforms them into a high-quality, fur-trimmed green winter coat for him. On top of that, she makes him leaf-stuffed bedding and wind-blocking curtains for his cabin, instantly upgrading his standard of living. Zabuton decides to move into the canopy of the giant tree above his camp, and Hiraku discovers that her absolute favorite food is his freshly grown potatoes. Thanks to his new coat and Zabuton's curtains, Hiraku stays perfectly warm throughout the snowy winter, though he spends many dark nights sitting by his fire, feeling incredibly lonely and wishing he had another person to talk to. Eventually, the snow melts and spring arrives. The 4 wolf pups, who are now fully grown, head off into the forest to find mates. They return a few days later, each bringing back a new partner, significantly expanding the pack. Around the same time, Zabuton climbs down from the giant tree accompanied by a massive swarm of baby spiders. Hiraku is thrilled to see his animal family growing, but he realizes he now has far more mouths to feed, so he grabs his hoe and works tirelessly to expand his crop fields even further. One afternoon, while working in the dirt, Hiraku hears a rhythmic banging sound. He looks up and sees Zabuton striking a wooden board with a mallet to sound the alarm. Kuro immediately runs up to Hiraku and leads him deep into the forest to investigate the threat. When they arrive at the scene, Hiraku is completely shocked to find a young elf girl with long white hair and blue eyes tied up in layers of Zabuton's thick white spider webs. The girl is blushing and crying for help as the entire wolf pack surrounds her, growling aggressively. Hiraku quickly yells at the wolves to stop and calls them off. He turns to the girl and tries to figure out if she is a dangerous enemy. Without warning, the girl lunges forward, embraces him, and sinks her fangs deep into his neck. She sucks his blood, immediately regaining enough energy to magically grow from a child back into a mature, beautiful woman. The wolves immediately lunge at her again, kicking up a massive dust cloud that sends the girl flying. When the dust settles, she has shrunk back down into a tiny, blushing child. Hiraku commands the dogs to sit and asks the girl why they attacked her. The girl, nearly in tears, admits that she attacked the wolves first because she thought she could easily defeat one of them, but she was horribly wrong. She explains that she used up all her energy fighting the beasts and couldn't maintain her adult form, which is why she desperately needed to suck his blood. Feeling guilty about how badly the wolves beat her up, Hiraku generously offers his neck and tells her to take as much blood as she needs. The girl bites him again, and with another surge of energy, she restores herself to her adult size. She is completely amazed and tells Hiraku that she has never tasted blood so full of vitality. Hiraku leads her back to his camp, and the moment they step out of the forest, the girl is absolutely mind-blown to see a massive, thriving agricultural village hidden in the middle of the deadly woods. She looks at his crops and admits she has never seen tomatoes or corn before. Hiraku magically summons a pair of scissors and cuts a fresh red tomato from the vine for her to try. She takes a bite and is overwhelmed by how incredibly juicy and delicious it is. Hiraku then shows her his towering corn stalks, and they both happily eat fresh ears of corn. He also pulls a massive white radish out of the ground, completely impressing her with his farming skills. Later that evening, the two of them sit inside his warmly lit wooden cabin. The girl uses a glowing blue holographic magic display to analyze the vegetable. She formally introduces herself as Lulusi, a vampire who specializes in researching medicinal plants. She explains that she got into a fierce dispute with some greedy nobles who wanted to steal her life's work. To escape their assassins, she fled to the infamous Forest of Death to lay low and continue her research, but she almost got killed by the local wildlife. Lu admits she had no idea the forest had such a savage reputation, and is utterly shocked to learn that Hiraku is the one who tamed all the terrifying beasts living outside. She is also fascinated by his magic tool, guessing it must be a rare artifact. Sensing a rare opportunity, Hiraku nervously tells Lu that he wants her to stay and live with him forever. Lu is completely taken aback and starts blushing intensely. She stammers, saying the proposal is way too sudden since they just met. Hiraku desperately pleads his case, explaining that he moved out here to be away from society, but quickly realized that absolute isolation is unbearable. He doesn't want to spend the rest of his life completely alone and begs her not to leave. Lu nervously fidgets with her hands and finally agrees to stay, but she mentions that his marriage proposal was incredibly forward. Hiraku is completely confused and asks what she means by a proposal. Lu gets angry, blushing furiously, and yells that asking a woman to be with him forever is a marriage proposal. Realizing his poor phrasing, Hiraku panics and starts sweating, but instead of backing down, he loudly declares that a marriage proposal is exactly what he meant and what he wants. He drops to his knees in a dramatic bow, begging her to accept him. Lu smiles warmly, tells him she already said yes, and accepts his proposal. Hiraku erupts with joy, grabs Lu, and literally flies through the night sky in celebration while she clings to his back in panic. The next morning, Hiraku is out in the fields when Lu walks up to him in a beautiful clearing full of yellow flowers. She has shrunk back down into her child form and explains that she stays small for her own protection, so he won't be tempted to touch her inappropriately. Hiraku awkwardly promises to restrain himself. He happily tells her that a simple morning greeting makes his day infinitely better. He mentions his plans to grow sweet potatoes next, since they preserve well and are easy to prepare. He then officially names Lu as the very first villager of his settlement. Lu is confused and asks what he means by a village. Hiraku laughs and explains that while she is the first humanoid villager, she is technically the 30th member of the community, if he counts the entire wolf pack and Zabaton's massive spider family. Lu giggles at the absurd title and quickly changes the subject. She asks Hiraku if he thinks they can grow medicinal herbs in his magical fields. Hiraku agrees to try, and Lu suggests they need to find a way to get their hands on the right seeds. Hiraku smiles confidently and reveals that with his magical farming tool, they don't actually need any seeds at all. Some days later, Hiraku and Lu settle into their daily routine, and he quickly realizes just how much having her around improves his life on the farm. One morning, Lu uses her magic to cast a spell that creates a bright golden light inside her wooden shed, officially solving their indoor lighting problem. Later, while they are eating a hearty stew made of meat and asparagus, Hiraku mentions that the food tastes a bit bland because he hasn't been able to find any salt anywhere in the forest. Lu suddenly looks extremely nervous and points out that the rocky ground he has been digging through under the massive tree is actually a giant salt mine. She explains that they can just dissolve the surrounding rocks in water and boil it down to get all the salt they need, leaving Hiraku feeling a bit foolish for not noticing it earlier. After that, they go out to check on the new fruit trees they planted, which include oranges, peaches, and chestnuts. As they sit on a log drinking tea and watching the saplings grow, Hiraku mentions that while Lu's herbal tea is great, he really wishes he could make some green tea. He recalls that green tea, oolong tea, and black tea all come from the same leaves, but he isn't quite sure how the actual processing works. Before he can dwell on it too much, their peaceful afternoon is suddenly interrupted by a loud commotion in the forest. Hiraku looks up to see a blonde girl with large white feathered wings crashing into the clearing, completely terrified and crying out for help. She begs for forgiveness and immediately surrenders to the pack of horned wolves that have completely surrounded her. Seeing her in distress, Hiraku calls off the wolves and steps in to rescue her from the beasts. Once she catches her breath, the winged girl stands up and casts a spell, creating glowing orbs and beams of magical energy around herself. Hiraku is incredibly impressed by her magic and warmly praises her abilities. However, the winged girl suddenly spots Lu standing nearby and angrily declares that she has finally found her target. She tells Lu to stop resisting and come quietly, but before she can actually do anything to arrest her, the horned wolves swarm her again and completely trap her in a chaotic scuffle while Hiraku rushes over in a panic to break up the fight. A little later, they all sit down inside Hiraku's rustic cabin to talk things out. The winged girl is exhausted and complains about how ruthless the wolves are, noting that they easily dodge magic and make fighting them completely impossible. Lu fully agrees, admitting that she suffered the exact same beating when she first arrived. The winged girl then asks who Hiraku is, and Lu blushes deeply before proudly announcing that he is her husband. The winged girl is completely shocked by this sudden revelation. Hiraku quickly introduces himself to ease the tension, and the winged girl introduces herself as Tia, an angel. She explains that angels are a warrior race that used to be worshipped by humans, and she is currently hunting Lu because there is a massive bounty on her head. Tia reveals that Lu went on a massive rampage and caused extensive damage to a town. Lu immediately defends herself, explaining that an annoying noble kept forcing her to make specialized medicines and drugs for them, so she eventually got fed up and blew up his estate to teach him a lesson. Tia yells that blowing up an estate is not a small lesson, and points out that Lu's actions severely besmirched a noble's honor. Despite the argument, Lu casually admits she might have gone a little too far, which completely surprises Tia, who notes that Lu never used to admit her own weaknesses. Lu confesses that getting beaten up by the wolves taught her just how weak she actually is, and Tia completely understands her pain. Brushing the bounty issue aside, Lu excitedly leans across the table and asks Tia to live with them on the farm. Tia is completely caught off guard by the invitation, but Lu insists and promises to show her around the property. They head outside, and Lu proudly shows off the massive vegetable fields and the growing orchard. Tia is genuinely amazed by the sheer scale of their agricultural work. Then Lu takes Tia to the rocky cave to introduce her to Zabuton, their giant spider roommate. The moment Tia lays eyes on the massive spider, she completely freezes in terror and faints on the spot, collapsing onto the dusty ground. Shortly after, Lu wakes Tia up and completely ignores her traumatic fainting spell, immediately dragging her out to the garden to help harvest cabbages and strawberries. Tia complains that an angel shouldn't have to get her hands dirty with farm work, but Hiraku hands her a fresh cabbage leaf sprinkled with salt. Tia takes a bite and is absolutely blown away by the incredible flavor of the fresh vegetable. By the end of the day, they have harvested massive baskets full of crops. Tia admits that the work is surprisingly fulfilling. However, everyone is completely exhausted from the manual labor. Lu uses the opportunity to corner Tia, begging her to stay and live with them, because she and Hiraku simply cannot keep up with all the harvesting on their own. Tia feels bad for them and finally agrees to stay permanently. In the following days, Tia proves to be a huge help around the farm. She and Lu use their magic to control a massive stone golem, easily transporting heavy wooden logs across the forest to help Hiraku with construction. Meanwhile, the wolf family continues to expand rapidly. The newest litter of pups has already started growing their horns, and Hiraku realizes that their original hut is getting way too crowded for the pack. To solve the problem, he builds a massive wooden structure that looks like a horse stable right next to the orchard, creating a dedicated living area just for the dogs. At the same time, Zabuton's eggs finally hatch and a massive swarm of tiny blue spiderlings emerges. Hiraku watches in awe as the baby spiders weave silk parachutes and ride the wind high into the sky to start their own journeys, though he is happy to see that a few of them decide to stay behind on the farm. Shortly after the spiderlings leave, Tia announces that she needs to step out for a few days to take care of some personal business. Hiraku is worried she is leaving them for good, but Lu assures him she will be right back. A few days later, Tia returns to the farm, but she isn't alone. She brings along 7 high elf women, all wearing matching green and white uniforms. Hiraku is surprised by the sudden influx of guests, and the elves introduce themselves as Leia, Leaf, Lekat, Lize, Lili, Lita, and Lise. Hiraku notes that their names are all incredibly similar, and the elves explain that they are all directly related to each other. They reveal their tragic backstory, explaining that their entire village in the north was destroyed during a human war 200 years ago. Since then, their race has been scattered, and they have been wandering through the dense forests, desperately searching for a safe place to settle down. The oldest elf is over 400 years old, while the youngest is around 300, though Hiraku cannot tell the difference between them at all. The elves beg Hiraku to let them live on the farm so they can finally have a permanent home and begin repopulating their race. Tia and Lu both vouch for the elves, promising that they are incredibly hard workers, so Hiraku gladly agrees to let them stay as long as everyone gets along. He then decides to introduce the elves to their other roommates. First, he introduces them to Zabuton. Just like Tia, all 7 elves instantly freeze in sheer terror and simultaneously faint, collapsing into the dirt. After they wake up, Hiraku introduces them to the pack of horned wolves, and the elves immediately faint a second time, leaving Hiraku chuckling at the predictable outcome. Now that the farm's population has completely exploded, Hiraku realizes they desperately need more housing. The elves offer to handle the construction, and Hiraku quickly discovers that they are absolute experts at building. He uses his magical tool to effortlessly slice down massive iron-hard trees, and he handles all the heavy digging and foundation leveling. The elves expertly process the lumber and seamlessly fit the massive logs together. Working as a perfectly coordinated team, they manage to construct a massive, multi-story wooden log cabin in just 10 days. The new building is incredibly impressive, featuring a huge central living room that doubles as a dining area, multiple storage rooms on the first floor, and individual bedrooms for all the elves on the second floor. The entire structure is perfectly lit by magical lights installed in the ceiling. Hiraku stands on the second floor balcony, looking down at everyone celebrating in the living room, and feels a deep sense of pride, hoping this massive cabin will finally give the elves the safe home they have been searching for. The next day, the elves completely integrate into the farm's daily routine, helping with the vegetable harvesting. Hiraku walks by the fields and is shocked to see the elves happily eating raw garlic and onions straight out of the ground. He confesses that he always thought elves were mystical beings who lived in perfect harmony with nature, never used fire, strictly ate fruit, and completely refused to use metal. The elves laugh at his ridiculous stereotypes and explain that trying to live like that in a harsh forest would instantly get them killed. They assure him that they are actually hardcore survivalists who use fire and eat meat just like anyone else. To prove their point, the elves offer to do some mining and blacksmithing as a thank you for letting them stay. Hiraku is stunned, having always assumed that dwarves handled all the blacksmithing in Fantasy World. Following Leah's exact instructions, the elves build a highly efficient earthen furnace out of bricks. They gather iron sand from the nearby river, process it with charcoal, and expertly hammer the melted iron on an anvil to forge a flawless metal pan. Hiraku is absolutely thrilled that their civilization is rapidly advancing, and praises their incredible skills. The elves note that wandering for 200 years forces you to learn how to do absolutely everything, except for settling down and reproducing. Hiraku internally jokes that he already helped Lu with the reproduction part, but wisely keeps his mouth shut to avoid making things awkward. Later, while they are all out gathering medicinal herbs in the forest, the elves spot the wheat fields and ask if they can have some. Hiraku explains that he already processed all the harvested wheat into flour for storage. The elves are delighted and ask if they can use the flour to bake bread. One of the elves pulls out a ceramic jar containing natural yeast, explaining that it will make the dough rise perfectly. They quickly mix the dough, wrap it around wooden skewers, and roast the spiral bread over an open fire pit. Hiraku takes a bite and is absolutely amazed by how delicious the freshly baked bread tastes. Realizing that they can now bake real bread, Hiraku immediately decides he needs to massively expand the wheat fields to keep up with the new demand. However, a sudden thought worries him. He turns to Lu and asks if the land they are building on actually belongs to anyone, fearing he might be trespassing. Lu casually mentions that the entire forest is technically under the absolute control of the Demon Lord. Hiraku panics, completely terrified that the Demon Lord might show up and destroy everything they have built. However, Lu quickly calms him down, explaining that since Hiraku cleared the land and built the entire farm completely on his own without any outside support, the property legally belongs to him. Hiraku breathes a massive sigh of relief, happy to know his home is safe. Later that night, while Hiraku is alone in his cabin drawing up plans for a new waterway, Tia and Lu sit around their own table snacking on fresh tomatoes and cucumbers. Tia is still completely amazed by Hiraku's incredible farming skills and his ability to effortlessly tame terrifying monsters like the Inferno wolves and the demon spider. However, she points out that despite his overwhelming power, he severely lacks even the most basic common sense about how their world actually works, citing his complete ignorance about angels and his ridiculous assumptions about elves. Lu just laughs and fully agrees, finding his lack of world knowledge incredibly charming. Meanwhile, Hiraku finalizes his blueprints and decides he will ask the elves to help him construct the massive new canal tomorrow, eager to continue expanding their perfect life in the woods. The next morning, Hiraku heads out to start his day and finds Zabuton with a new catch. The giant spider has managed to trap a massive queen bee. The bee wears a tiny gold crown and looks absolutely terrified. Hiraku decides that keeping the bee around could be really useful for harvesting honey. He builds a small wooden house near the orchard, specifically for the bees to live in. In just 10 days, the queen bee establishes a massive hive, and all the regular-sized worker bees are busy flying around doing their jobs. Hiraku wonders if he needs to plant a special flower garden nearby to ensure they make good honey. While he is thinking about it, Tia peeks into the shed, but as soon as she spots the giant hornets, she completely panics and runs away screaming. Hiraku figures she must have had a bad experience with bee stings in the past and goes back to his work. Later, Hiraku and Leah go out to check the progress on the new reservoir. Hiraku explains that he wants to connect the reservoir to the river with a long waterway, but they are stuck on what materials to use. Building it out of wood would lead to a lot of leakage over such a long distance, and they do not have enough stone around the forest. Hiraku comes up a brilliant idea. He uses his farming tool in the form of a hammer to smash piles of dirt, magically compacting the soil into solid blocks that are as hard as concrete. The elves quickly jump in to help him mass-produce the dirt blocks. They carry the heavy pieces through the forest and perfectly align them in the newly dug trenches. With everyone working together, they manage to build a fully functioning aqueduct that channels water directly from a waterfall all the way into their new stone reservoir. This massive upgrade means they no longer have to pull water out of a well every single day, making crop watering incredibly easy. Suddenly, a large silver fish with sharp teeth leaps right out of the churning reservoir water and flops onto the wooden platform. Hiraku is thrilled to finally have some fresh seafood. He instantly kills the ferocious fish with one swift strike of his hoe and quickly prepares it for a meal. He skewers the fish and grills it over an open campfire. Lu and Tia watch nervously, pointing out that the fish is actually a vicious monster, native to the dangerous forest. Hiraku ignores their worries and happily takes a bite, noting that it tastes exactly like regular salmon. Seeing him enjoy it, Lu and Tia hesitantly take a bite from their own plates. Their fear instantly turns into sheer joy, and they cry tears of happiness because the fish tastes so unbelievably good. Hiraku offers the rest of the meal to the elves, and they all absolutely love it. From then on, they catch as many fish as they can and preserve them with salt to store for the upcoming winter. With the new water supply running perfectly, Hiraku decides to experiment with his crop. He tills a small patch of dirt while thinking about rice, and golden stalks immediately sprout from the soil. Realizing he can grow rice, he decides to go all out and build a proper flooded rice paddy. He uses his hoe to dig massive rectangular trenches in the clearing. He fills the trenches with water from the new canal, turning the dark soil into deep muddy ponds. The elves watch the entire process with intense curiosity, having never seen anything like it. Hiraku invites them to step into the water, and they eagerly roll up their sleeves and splash around in the slippery mud. Hiraku hands out bundles of bright green rice seedlings, and they all spend the afternoon planting the crops in neat little rows. Thanks to the limitless power of the farming tool and the constant water supply, the rice grows incredibly fast. Zabuton even sends her tiny spiderlings down to the paddies to keep all the harmful pests away. When harvest time arrives, Hiraku and the elves use sickles to slice through the golden stalks, finishing the massive job in a matter of minutes. They bundle the harvested rice and hang it on wooden racks to dry out under the sun. Leah asks Hiraku why they are doing this, and he sheepishly admits he just copied the technique from a television show he saw once. After the rice is completely dry, the real hard work begins. Hiraku builds a spiked wooden threshing machine to separate the grains from the stalks. He then sifts the grains through a wooden sieve to remove the loose leaves. Finally, he uses a heavy stone mortar and pestle to hull and polish every single grain by hand. The incredibly tedious process leaves Lu and Tia completely exhausted just from watching him work. Once the rice is perfectly polished, Hiraku takes it to the kitchen to cook. He places the rice in a metal pot over a traditional stone stove and asks Lu to start a low fire. Lu dramatically unleashes a massive explosive spell, completely ignoring his request for a gentle flame. Despite the magical overkill, the rice cooks perfectly. Hiraku removes the heavy wooden lid, and a cloud of steam reveals fluffy, glistening white rice. He then grabs the salted salmon they preserved earlier and uses it as a filling to make large, fluffy rice balls. He hands the fresh onigiri to Lu and Tia. They take a bite and are instantly overwhelmed by the delicious combination of the salty fish and the warm rice. The elves also try the food and are equally blown away by the incredible flavor. Hiraku sits back on a log and happily declares this his proudest moment as a farmer, eager to try making different fillings for them in the future. The next day, after finishing another long shift in the muddy rice paddies, the girls use their magic to instantly clean all the dirt off their bodies. Hiraku has to wipe himself down manually and realizes how much he desperately misses taking a hot bath. He immediately grabs a stick and draws up blueprints for a traditional bathhouse right in the dirt. He plans out a furnace, a massive tub, a washing area, and a changing room. The elves ask why they cannot just bathe in the nearby river, but Hiraku points out that the water will be freezing cold once winter arrives. Determined to see his dream come true, Hiraku starts building. He uses compacted dirt blocks to build a heavy furnace and a tall chimney to heat the water. The elves help him construct the wooden tub and run pipes from the aqueduct straight into the building. As they finish up, Hiraku suddenly realizes they have a major problem. He worries that dumping dirty bathwater and sewage back into the river will completely pollute their fresh water supply. Tia quickly offers a solution, suggesting they use slimes to purify the waste. Hiraku panics, thinking of slimes as dangerous monsters that easily kill rookie adventurers. Tia laughs off his fears and flies out to the forest, returning a few minutes later with a handful of small, bouncy blue slimes. She proves that they are completely harmless and only eat organic waste. Hiraku drops the slimes into a special purification pool and even puts a few down the toilets, officially solving all their sanitation issues. With the bathhouse complete, Hiraku heads to the woodpile to grab some firewood to heat the tub. He notices some strange mushrooms growing on the logs, and hesitates, afraid that they might be highly poisonous. Lu checks a magical book and confirms that wild mushrooms are incredibly difficult to tell apart. Tia aggressively offers to blast them all with her magic, but the elves step in and explain that most of them are perfectly edible if cooked properly. Not wanting to take any risks, Hiraku uses his farming tool to cultivate specific mushrooms like shiitake and shimiji directly on the logs. The farming process distracts him so much that he completely forgets about the bath until the sun starts setting. He gathers Lu, Tia, and the elves in the changing room and explains the proper etiquette for using a bathhouse. He tells them to strip down, wash off outside the tub, and then soak in the hot water to relax. The girls are slightly confused by the rules and ask him to demonstrate the process for them. Hiraku nervously strips down to a towel, goes through the washing steps, and finally sinks into the hot water. He closes his eyes and completely melts into the steaming tub, realizing this is his first real bath since he was hospitalized in his past life. However, his peaceful moment is immediately ruined when all the girls strip naked and happily jump into the water right next to him. Hiraku gets incredibly embarrassed by the sudden crowd of naked women and quickly climbs out of the tub, leaving them to enjoy the hot water on their own. The girls complain that he is just trying to hoard the bath for himself, while Hiraku kicks himself for not building a separate men's bath to avoid this exact situation. A few days later, Kuro and the wolf pack return from a patrol with 5 more high elves trailing behind them. The new elves introduce themselves as Lafa, Lassa, Lalasha, Lalu, and Lami. They explain that they were separated from Leah's group during the Great War 200 years ago, and have been wandering the forest ever since. Hiraku warmly invites them to live on the farm, and the elves accept with immense gratitude. They eagerly volunteer to help expand the village and excitedly cheer about making children to revive their dying race. Hiraku just smiles and brushes off their wild enthusiasm, happy to see the community growing so quickly. Meanwhile, Kuro watches the new arrivals from the edge of the clearing and reflects on his past. Long before Hiraku arrived, Kuro was the undisputed alpha of the Dark Forest. He never lost a single fight until he met his mate, Yuki. She completely beat him down, and they started traveling together. Soon after, Yuki got pregnant, and they started looking for a safe place to raise their pups. Unfortunately, they ran into the grappler bear, the terrifying king of the forest. They barely survived the brutal encounter and were forced to flee to the deepest, most dangerous part of the woods. Starving and on the brink of death, they stumbled upon Hiraku. At first, Kuro thought Hiraku was just a weak human, but he quickly sensed the limitless, terrifying power radiating from his farming tool. Instead of killing them, Hiraku fed them the meat of a great boar and built a safe wooden shelter for them to heal. Kuro and Yuki instantly decided to swear absolute loyalty to him. Over time, their pack grew massive, and Kuro watched as Hiraku effortlessly gathered terrifyingly powerful beings like the vampire, the angel, and the high elf. Kuro realizes that his master is a being of unimaginable power and influence. He chuckles to himself, hoping that Hiraku never finds out that his loyal pet dogs are actually a legendary pack of terrifying inferno wolves, and remains forever grateful that his good fortune led him to this perfect life. With the massive 2-story log mansion finally complete, Hiraku and the elves stand outside to admire their new home. The structure looks huge, and the elves are thrilled to see that all their design requests were perfectly incorporated into the construction. Leah points out that it would not feel right if Hiraku did not have the nicest house in the village. They decide to take a tour of the interior and step inside the warmly lit mansion. Hiraku notices that the inside looks a lot like the houses the high elves usually live in. They start their tour in the main hall, which is designed as a large gathering space for everyone to hang out and chat. Right across from the main hall is Hiraku's personal room, which is spacious and cozy. They continue exploring and find the dining room equipped with a long wooden table and round stools for meals. In the back, there is a fully equipped kitchen, and Hiraku mentions that they also set up more stoves outside for outdoor cooking. They then head down a wooden staircase into a dim, stone-walled cellar, and the elves note that it will be perfect for storing food and firewood. Moving to the second floor, the girls check out their own private rooms. Tia and Lu are especially happy to finally have their own space, since the old cabin was getting way too crowded with all the new residents. As they walk down the hallway, Hiraku notices a sturdy wooden door with a heavy bolt lock on it. He asks why a room would need a lock like that, but the girls quickly slide the door shut, hiding a large plush bed inside, and Hiraku decides to just pretend he never saw anything. They finish the tour in the bathroom, where a large wooden bathtub sits on the stone floor. From the window, they can see the towering ancient tree, making them feel like it is watching over the entire homestead. Hiraku sincerely thanks the girls for their hard work and tells them to let him know if anything needs fixing after they spend the winter here. Later, Hiraku uses his magic farming tool to carve large stone statues of the horned wolves and places them right in front of the mansion's entrance to complete the look. With the house finished, Hiraku is starving from all the hard work and heads to the kitchen. He tells Lu and Tia that he plans to make a completely new dish called curry. Lu and Tia have never heard of it, and Hiraku explains that while it is usually easy to make with pre-made roux, mastering it from scratch takes a lot of effort. Lu jokingly acts shocked and calls him a savage for being into such weird things, completely misunderstanding his culinary ambition. Hiraku heads out to his crop fields to harvest the necessary ingredients. He shows the girls the various unfamiliar plants he has managed to grow, using the almighty farming tool, explaining that many of these crops normally cannot survive in their climate. First, he harvests cumin, noting that it is the spice most responsible for curry's signature aroma. Leah takes a whiff of the dried seeds and finds the smell quite peculiar. Next, he digs up turmeric roots, explaining that this is what gives curry its yellow color. He mentions that he had the girls use their magic to dry the roots out beforehand. Then he moves on to coriander and explains that they need to grind the seeds into powder, noting its fresh, fruit-like scent. He also grabs some of the green leaves from the top, calling it cilantro. He offers a sprig of cilantro to Kuro and the other wolves, but the moment they smell it, they completely freak out and run away. Lu and Tia are shocked to see a simple plant drive off the terrifying inferno wolves, and decide that they need to research it immediately, thinking it might be a powerful magical protection talisman. Hiraku laughs off their reaction, and finishes gathering black pepper and cayenne peppers. He suddenly worries that the girls might think he is annoying for insisting on making curry from scratch with raw spices, but he decides to go through with it anyway. He sets up an outdoor cooking station and realizes that Leah is the only one helping him since Lu and Tia are too busy researching the cilantro. Hiraku starts by heating up rapeseed oil in a large metal pan and throws in chunks of rabbit meat to brown them. He tells Leah to take the meat off the heat once it gets some color, and then he uses the leftover meat juices to cook the cumin seeds, warning her not to burn them. The rich aroma immediately fills the air, and Leah is amazed by the incredible smell. Hiraku then sauté finely diced onions, ginger, and garlic, making sure they turn into a nice paste before tossing in diced tomatoes. Once the base is ready, he dumps in the ground spices and some salt, followed by the cooked meat, boiled soybeans, and water. He puts a wooden lid on the pot and tells Leah they just have to let it simmer until the meat gets soft. As they wait, Hiraku suddenly panics, realizing he completely forgot to make naan to go with the curry. Leah has no idea what naan is, and Hiraku frantically calculates how many portions he needs to make for everyone. He quickly whips up a massive batch of dough, explaining to Leah that the process is similar to making regular bread but requires rolling the dough out flat. He then sticks the flattened dough onto the hot exterior of an overturned metal pot to bake it. The delicious scent drifts over to the other girls and the wolves, drawing a crowd as everyone eagerly waits to eat. As the sun sets, Hiraku serves up bowls of the savory meat curry alongside the fresh naan. The girls are initially hesitant because of the strange brown color, but Hiraku encourages them to dip the flatbread into the stew. Lu takes a bite and is instantly blown away by the flavor. Tia finds the tingly spiciness incredibly addicting, and all the elves agree that the meal is absolutely delicious. They all eat until they are completely stuffed, and the wolves happily devour their portions as well, despite finding it a bit spicy. Hiraku is thrilled that his experiment was a massive success and promises to try tweaking the spice ratios next time. Soon after, the weather starts getting colder, signaling that winter is fast approaching. Hiraku knows they will be stuck indoors once the snow starts falling, so he rushes to finish their winter preparation. He checks the storage sheds and confirms they have plenty of firewood stacked up. He then brings a basket of potatoes and extra blankets to Zabaton, who is preparing to hibernate at the top of the giant tree. Leah and the other elves decide to spend the winter working on the forge and various indoor crafting projects. Meanwhile, Lu and Tia use their magic to smoke and dry massive slabs of rabbit and boar meat to ensure they have enough protein since the wolves will not be able to hunt in the deep snow. The wolves comically steal some of the meat right off the racks, but Hiraku is confident they have enough stored away. For the vegetables, Hiraku builds a large wooden structure for a preservation method called snow storage. He places cabbages and radishes in the top compartments, covers them with a white sheet, and plans to bury the whole thing in snow, leaving the bottom boxes empty to catch any melting water. While watching Lu and Tia effortlessly use their fire and wind magic to help with chores, Hiraku feels a sudden urge to try using magic himself. He stretches out his hands and attempts to cast a spell, but absolutely nothing happens. He feels a bit embarrassed and later talks to Lu about it inside the cabin. Lu explains that even a basic ignition spell requires intense study and cannot just be cast on a whim. Hiraku admits that seeing Tia summon massive stone golems makes him feel useless, but Lu quickly shuts him down. She tells him that he is the most amazing person on the farm because he managed to survive and build this entire life out in the dangerous forest all by himself. Winter finally arrives and heavy snow blankets the entire forest, forcing everyone to stay inside the cozy log mansion. Knowing they will need ways to pass the time, Hiraku uses his woodworking skills to craft several tabletop games. He starts by making a reversi board, a chess set, and a full set of Mong tile. He introduces reversi to the girls, explaining the simple rules of flipping the opponent's pieces by surrounding them. Lu confidently declares it a simple game and immediately challenges Tia to a match to settle their ongoing rivalry. Tia plays with the white pieces, and Lu plays with the black pieces. However, as the game progresses, it becomes clear that Tia is winning. Unable to handle the impending defeat, Lu purposely slips and flips the entire board, scattering the pieces everywhere. Tia simply sighs, uses her magic to levitate the pieces, and places them right back into their exact positions on the board, leaving Lu completely defeated and sulking in the corner. Later, Hiraku walks into the main hall and is absolutely terrified to see Kuro and another wolf sitting at the table, intensely playing a proper game of chess. Lu decides she can easily beat a dog and challenges Kuro to a match, but she ends up losing terribly and huddles on the floor in a state of comical despair. Wanting to avenge Lu's honor, Hiraku sets up a game of mahjong against Kuro, Tia, and Leia. He assumes the wolves will not be able to grasp the complex rules of mahjong, but Kuro quickly proves him wrong. Just as Hiraku thinks he is about to win, Kuro calls Ron and reveals a perfect Yakuman hand, specifically the 13 orphan. The massive score completely wipes out Hiraku's points, and he slumps over the table in exhaustion while declaring Kuro the undisputed champion of the household. Since sitting around playing board games all day is making them lazy, Hiraku decides to introduce a more active game and builds a mini bowling alley down the main hallway. He carves 10 wooden pins and paints cartoonish villain faces on them, labeling them as scam artists, arsonists, and serial killers to give the girls a reason to want to knock them down. He rolls a wooden ball down the carpeted lane and successfully knocks over most of the pins, perfectly demonstrating the game. The girls absolutely love the simplicity and action of bowling, and they spend the rest of the winter cheering and high-fiving as they take turns throwing the ball. The cold days fly by quickly, filled with games and warm hot pot meals. Soon enough, the snow begins to melt, and spring finally arrives. Hiraku steps out of the mansion on a bright sunny morning and takes a deep breath of the warm air. He meets up with Lou and Tia outside and tells them he wants to start planting the new crops as soon as possible. He also looks up at the giant tree, noting that Zabuton should be waking up from her hibernation any day now. While they are discussing their plans, Lou points up at the sky in shock. They all look up and see a massive winged creature flying rapidly toward the farm. Hiraku panics and assumes it is a dragon, but Tia quickly identifies the red muscular beast as a dangerous wyvern. Before anyone can even react, a massive blast of cyan magical energy shoots up from the ground and strikes the wyvern head-on. The powerful beam completely engulfs the beast, vaporizing it into glowing energy particles in a brilliant flash of light. The magical blast pierces right through the wyvern's thick barrier and kills the beast instantly. Its massive body crashes down into the trees. The girls quickly rush into the woods to put out the scattered fires caused by the intense magical battle. They check the area and confirm that all the buildings are perfectly safe. Some of the crop fields took a little damage, but nothing major is destroyed. Hiraku looks at the dead monster and wonders if an enemy sent it specifically to attack them. The elves assure him that wyverns are incredibly rare creatures. They tell him no one would ever risk sending such a valuable beast out alone, so it must have been a wild monster acting on its own. Hiraku accepts this explanation and feels relieved. He then looks at the massive carcass and asks the girls if they can eat it. Lou tells him wyvern meat is actually considered a high-class delicacy. She shares a legend about a king who once sent an entire army into a wyvern den just to taste the meat. Hiraku jokes that the army probably got roasted alive and swallowed whole. He takes out his knife and starts carving up the beast. He prepares a massive feast for everyone in the log cabin. He grills thick wyvern round steaks with spices. He wraps the breast meat in large leaves and steams it to perfection. He also chops up the tail meat and simmers it into a hearty vegetable stew. Everyone gathers around the wooden table to eat. The elves are absolutely amazed at how tender the meat is. They point out that a normal blade cannot even scratch a wyvern's scales, but Hiraku prepared it effortlessly. Lou enjoys the food so much she starts speaking with her mouth full. Hiraku tells her to swallow her food before talking. The girls discuss the recent battle while enjoying the stew. They realize they are incredibly lucky to have Hiraku and the wolves protecting them. They know they would never be able to survive a powerful attack like that on their own. Far away in the demonic kingdom of Galgardo, the Demon Lord's 4 great generals hold an emergency meeting in their dark castle. Beazle, Randon, and Gratz review the latest battle reports. They are completely shocked to hear that a massive wyvern was killed in just 2 hits from a ground attack. The generals panic because a beast of that level usually requires mobilizing their entire military force just to drive it away. Randon gets so stressed out that he slams his hands on the wooden table. He complains that he just finished getting the year's budget approved and absolutely cannot deal with a new supernatural threat ruining his plans. He completely gives up and tells the others he wants to resign from his position immediately. Beazle quickly stops him and tells him they have to manage the situation before fear and panic start spreading among their citizens. Meanwhile, at a remote mountain fortress, the gatekeeper Dragon Drime and his assistant Gucci also witness the magical explosion from their balcony. Gucci asks his boss what would happen if Drime took a direct hit from that spear attack. Drime flat out admits the beam would pierce cleanly through his scales and kill him. They both agree it would be incredibly foolish to pick a fight with whoever lives in that forest and decide to stay as far away as possible. Back at the village, Hiraku decides it is finally time to start making alcohol. He tells the girls he wants to use their recent grape harvest to make wine. The elves are thrilled by the idea and quickly gather all the dark grapes from the vineyard. Hiraku asks the high elf Lalasha to build completely watertight wooden barrels to store the liquid. He sets up a massive wooden vat and pours all the freshly picked grapes inside. He tells the girls they need to stomp the grapes with their bare feet to crush them and extract the juice. The elves are a bit hesitant to step on something they plan to drink, but they jump into the vat anyway. They quickly realize it is hard to move in the thick, slippery mash. One of the elves suggests they need a rhythm to keep their movements in sync. She starts singing an old working song from her home village. The other girls join in and start stomping to the beat. They have a great time, but the physical labor is exhausting. Hiraku notices they are slowing down and decides they need more help. He grabs Lu and Tia and playfully forces them into the vat to help stomp the grapes. The girls complain at first, but quickly get into the rhythm and start having fun with the others. After a long day of stomping, they transfer all the crushed grape juice into 16 massive wooden barrels. Sylvia worries they did not make enough wine for everyone in the village. The other girls laugh and assure her they will easily drink it all anyway. Hiraku explains that the natural yeast found on the grape skins will cause the juice to ferment over time. Up in the divine realm, the goddess of agriculture is screaming at the main creator god. She is furious because he carelessly sent Hiraku's innocent soul to the incredibly dangerous forest of death. She yells at him for giving a mortal a replica of the holy lance grime to use as a simple farming tool. She explains that the holy weapon should have instantly drained Hiraku's life force and killed him on the spot. The creator god defends himself, claiming Hiraku is perfectly fine because he blessed him with a super healthy body that recovers quickly. The goddess refuses to listen to his excuses and gets even angrier about the wooden statues Hiraku carved for their village shrine. She points out that Hiraku carved her statue to look like an ugly old man instead of a beautiful goddess. The creator god says that mistake is not his fault, but the goddess punishes him anyway. She forces him to sit in a strict kneeling position for 300 years to think about his careless actions. Back at the farm, a white-haired vampire girl suddenly arrives. Her name is Flora and she is Lu's cousin. She rushed all the way to the forest because she heard Lu was being chased by a black-hearted angel. She is completely shocked to find the angel Tia just hanging out with Lu like nothing ever happened. Flora tries to act confident but immediately panics when she sees Kuro. She realizes the dogs running around the farm are actually legendary inferno wolves. She quickly pieces everything together and realizes Hiraku is the one controlling the wolves and killing wyverns. Terrified of his immense power, Flora immediately drops to the ground and prostrates herself. She apologizes profusely for her rude intrusion and begs for forgiveness. Hiraku tells her not to worry about it at all and invites her to stay for dinner. He serves a brand new meal featuring tofu, miso, and soy sauce. Flora asks what the soft white cubes are, and Hiraku explains it is tofu made from soybean. He then explains how he made the miso and soy sauce from fermented soybeans to add flavor to the soup. Since Flora is a passionate researcher just like Lu, she is fascinated by the concept. Hiraku explains that microscopic organisms cause fermentation and transform the matter without the need for any magic. Flora completely freaks out over this incredible scientific discovery. She declares it her new research subject and promises to spread the wonders of miso to the entire world. She immediately leaves the village in a huge hurry to pack her things so she can move in permanently. 1 month later, Flora returns to the village with a massive group of followers. She brings an entire staff of ogre maids led by a girl named Anne. She also brings a herd of cows so the village can finally produce fresh milk, butter, and cheese. Around the same time, Tia leaves for a short trip and comes back with her own subordinates. She introduces 3 heavily armed angel girls named Gran Maria, Kudal, and Corone. Tia assigns them to patrol different regions of the forest skies and watch for even the tiniest movements to keep the borders safe. She also brings a group of muscular green lizardmen led by a man named Daga. They bring a wooden cage full of chickens to provide the village with fresh eggs. The village becomes incredibly busy with all the new residents settling in. The ogre maids take over all the cleaning and cooking duties. Hiraku teaches them advanced cooking methods like frying, boiling, stir-frying, deep-frying, braising, and steaming. He cooks a special dish using killer rabbit meat and fragrant vegetables. The maids are amazed by the flavors and become deeply passionate about cooking. Meanwhile, the lizardmen take over all the heavy outdoor labor. Their raw strength speeds up the village construction significantly. Since the lizardmen all look identical, Hiraku gives Daga a red scarf to tie around his arm so he can easily tell him apart from the rest. Hiraku tries to calculate their rapidly booming population, but he gets interrupted. Leah and the other elves arrive with a massive group of wandering elves they found in the forest. Hiraku notices that every single one of the new elves is a woman. He asks where the men are. The elves explain that no men survived the journey. They tell him it is completely fine and joke that they will just make more men later. Hiraku decides not to ask how they plan to do that. A few days later, Hiraku calls a meeting with the representatives of all the different races. He gathers the elves, the angels, the maids, the lizardmen, and the wolves in the main hall. He tells them that the farm has grown from a single tiny hut into a full-blown town, so they need an official name. The elves suggest naming it after Hiraku. They propose names like Machio Town or Hiraku Village. Hiraku hates the sound of that and rejects the idea immediately. Someone suggests naming it after the forest instead. Hiraku asks what the forest is called. The girls tell him it is the Forest of Death. Hiraku points out that calling their home the Village of Death sounds like a terrifying ghost town filled with poison swamps. They quickly abandon that idea. Hiraku walks over to the massive wooden sliding doors and pushes them open. He points to the giant ancient tree standing in the center of their farm. He declares that from now on they will call their home the Great Tree Village. Everyone loves the name and stares in awe at the giant tree. To celebrate the official naming, Hiraku throws a massive outdoor party. He sets up a huge bonfire and brings out the very first batch of wine they stomped themselves. He tells everyone to enjoy themselves, and the feast begins. The elves, lizardmen, and maids all drink the wine and have a fantastic time. Everyone starts calling Hiraku the mayor. He gets flustered and tries to tell them they need to vote on it later, but they insist he is the only one for the job. As the night goes on, almost everyone gets completely drunk. The elves dance around with the barrels and sing songs. Flora passes out on a table with a blissful smile on her face. Even the horned wolves end up sprawling across the dirt in a drunken stupor. Hiraku sits quietly at a picnic table, watching the lively celebration. Lu and Tia notice he is zoning out and ask what is wrong. Hiraku tells them nothing is wrong. He admits he is just so happy that all of this feels like a wonderful dream. Tia smiles and assures him it is not a dream at all. She tells him they are all going to keep living there and enjoying their lives together. Hiraku agrees and raises his wooden mug. He toasts to the Great Tree Village. With his friends by his side and a growing community to protect, Hiraku finally accepts his new role as the official village mayor. Time passes and the seasons change from winter to summer as the village population continues to grow, though Hiraku finds that his daily routine as the mayor remains mostly the same. One day Tia flies into the farm and urgently announces that a messenger from the demonic kingdom has arrived. Hiraku gathers Lu, Tia, and a few armed guards to meet the visitor at the village entrance. He finds a man in a red suit named Beezle waiting for them. Beezle introduces himself as one of the Demon Lord's generals and politely asks for an audience with the person in charge. Hiraku steps forward with a nervous sweat drop on his face and introduces himself as the mayor. Beezle immediately presents him with a wooden chest containing an almighty medicine potion as a gift to commemorate their first meeting. Hiraku gladly accepts the rare item but starts to panic internally about the real reason the Demon Lord sent a messenger. He figures the Demon Lord either plans to demand massive taxes for living on his land or intends to kick them off the property entirely. Deciding he needs to act tough to protect his people, Hiraku steps up and preemptively offers to pay taxes to prove they have no intention of rebelling against the demonic kingdom. He nervously suggests a 10% tax rate, but quickly adds a strict condition that this only applies to their harvested crops. He firmly states that they will not hand over any of their milk, eggs, honey, or alcohol, and tells Beezle that if the Demon Kingdom wants those items, they will have to negotiate a proper trade agreement. Beezle immediately accepts the terms without a single argument, leaving Hiraku completely surprised by how easily the deal is settled. Hiraku officially signs a formal contract to solidify the arrangement. Feeling a bit bad about being so aggressive during the negotiations, Hiraku decides to send Beezle home with a large crate of their freshly harvested apples as a return gift. After Beezle leaves, Hiraku worries that he might have messed up, but Lu and Tia assure him that he actually pulled off an incredible deal. They explain that normal tax rates are usually around 50 or 60%, so securing a 10% rate means they essentially bought the Demon Lord's official protection for practically nothing. They also praise him for making the tax collectors come to the village only once a year, which guarantees the demons will never be able to accurately measure their total production. Meanwhile, Beezle returns to the Demon Lord's dark castle and holds an emergency meeting with the other generals, Gratz and Randan. The generals are completely terrified of the new village. Beezle explains that he had absolutely no choice but to accept Hiraku's demands because refusing would have instantly turned the village into an enemy force. He reveals that the village easily took down a wyvern and is currently guarded by the vampire Princess Lu, the Angel of Annihilation Tia, an army of high elves, and a massive pack of inferno wolves. Gratz and Randan panic over this overwhelming military power gathering in one location. Beezle then brings out the crate of apples he received as a gift. The generals initially worry that the fruit might be poisoned, but their fear reaches a breaking point when they look closely at the white cloth wrapping the crate. They instantly recognize the fabric as silk from a great demon spider, a legendary monster known for fighting previous demon lords to a standstill. Randan gets so incredibly stressed out by this revelation that he stands up and loudly declares he is resigning from his position immediately. However, one of the generals takes a bite of the apple and is completely amazed by how delicious it tastes, momentarily distracting them from their impending doom. Back at the Great Tree Village, Hiraku and his friends are suddenly visited by a massive blue dragon that lands right outside their fences. The dragon introduces himself as Drime, the true ruler of all dragons. Hiraku and the others are completely shocked to see a legendary beast on their farm. Drime's blonde assistant, a man named Gucci, steps forward and presents Hiraku with a fancy jewel-encrusted sword as a formal greeting gift. Hiraku thanks them for the expensive item but points out that a weapon is a rather violent present. Gucci ignores the comment and explains that Dryme's lair is located in the mountains to the south, and they simply flew over to formally introduce themselves as friendly neighbors. Dryme tries to bow politely, but his massive size causes a huge scene. Hiraku suggests they move the conversation indoors to be more comfortable, but points out that the dragon is way too big to fit inside any of their buildings. Gucci tells Dryme to shrink down, and the dragon immediately transforms into a human man with long dark hair and a mustache wearing a formal suit. They all head inside the new log tavern, and Dryme ends up absolutely loving the village. He drinks massive amounts of their red wine, eats their food, and loudly declares that he wants to live there permanently so he can intercept any attackers. Gucci refuses to let his boss abandon his own territory and forces Dryme to leave before he becomes a nuisance to the villagers. Dryme flies away into the night sky, but he loves the village so much that he starts visiting on a regular basis to hang out and drink. He always brings more rare treasures and weapons as gifts, so none of the villagers ever complain about his constant presence. Dealing with all these powerful visitors makes Hiraku realize that their diplomatic relations are getting very complicated, and he decides they need a much better system for handling guests. First, he feels it is rude to keep visitors waiting outside the village gates during negotiations, but he is also entirely uncomfortable inviting random strangers into their personal homes. He talks to the elves and suggests building a small guest house big enough for 4 people. The elves immediately reject the idea, explaining that anyone traveling through the dangerous forest will definitely arrive in large groups. They decide to build a massive 2-story guest house that can comfortably fit 30 people, setting up a large open feast space on the first floor and numerous bedrooms on the second floor. Next, Hiraku decides they need to completely overhaul their perimeter defense protocols. Previously, the angels would capture anyone they found in the woods and drag them to the village, while the giant spider Zabaton would sound a massive alarm that caused everyone to grab their weapons and prepare for a full-scale war. Hiraku points out that treating every visitor like an invading army is a terrible way to welcome people. Instead, the elves build a silver bell and hang it from a tree to act as a proper peaceful visitor signal. Hiraku wants to keep the welcoming party small, suggesting just himself, Lu, and Tia greet the guests, but the others argue that enemies might try to sneak in disguised as peaceful travelers. They insist on adding heavily armed high elves, ogre maids, and muscular lizard men to the welcoming committee to show off their strength and deter any sudden attacks. Flora also volunteers to stay awake and keep watch over the guests during the night, noting that vampires can easily go several days without sleeping. Hiraku's new hospitality system is quickly put to the test when a group of wolf-eared beastmen arrives at the forest bridge. Their leader, a man named Gulf, introduces himself and explains that they traveled from Howling Village in the eastern mountains specifically to establish trade relations. Tia greets them warmly and offers to take them to the new guest house so they can rest. She casually asks if Gulf's group of 4 is everyone. Gulf confirms it is his whole group. Tia's expression immediately turns serious, and she flatly states that they will treat anyone else they find as an enemy. Gulf starts sweating in a panic. Out in the woods, Kuro's Inferno wolves easily track down and corner 2 more beastmen who were hiding in the bushes to keep watch. Tia warns Gulf that leaving hidden troops outside the village is incredibly dangerous and tells him to make sure everyone stays together from now on. Gulf apologizes for the deception and promises they will follow the rules. Because of their highly suspicious behavior, Tia and the other girls secretly decide to downgrade the group's hospitality level. They put the beastmen in the guest house, but absolutely refuse to serve them the high-quality feast or the famous wine they usually reserve for important guests. Hiraku feels terrible watching the beastmen eat a meager meal of basic bread and plain vegetables while sitting in the tavern. However, the beastmen are actually thrilled just to have fresh tomatoes and a safe place to relax after their long journey. Hiraku feels so bad about treating them poorly that he forces the maids to serve them 2 cups of wine each anyway. The beastmen happily drink the wine and loudly celebrate their good fortune. Hiraku then sits down with Gulf to ask about his home. Gulf explains that Howling Village is a collection of small settlements filled with beastmen who survive by hunting and mining. They used to trade their goods with a human village across the mountains, but that trade route recently collapsed due to some trouble in the human lands. They heard about the Great Tree Village from a Demon Kingdom official and decided to travel all the way through the dangerous forest to find a new trading partner. Gulf explains that his village does not use currency, so they want to conduct a direct physical trade. They offer to provide mined ore, paints, silverware, glassworks, and metalworks. Hiraku gets incredibly excited about the prospect of getting glass and metal items, so he immediately agrees to trade their harvested food crops in return. Gulf wants to set up the market at his own village, but admits the journey through the forest is extremely difficult to make while carrying heavy goods. Hiraku briefly considers using his wolves to pull carts, but the trip is still much too long. Luckily, the gatekeeper Dragon Drimes steps in and offers to fly the trading party there on his back in exchange for a single barrel of wine. When the day of the trade arrives, Hiraku wants to go along, but the girls completely forbid it, claiming it looks weak to send the village leader to handle the very first trip. Instead, Tia leads a group of lizardmen to Howling Village. They load up the dragon with crops and fly off into the sky. A few days later, Tia returns to the farm and happily reports that the trade was a massive success. She explains that the beastmen were hesitant to try the weird new crops at first, so she offered them free samples. A huge crowd quickly gathered, and they ended up trading everything they brought, even selling the extra wine that was supposed to be saved for her. Tia also mentions that the mayor of Howling Village asked if some of their people could permanently move to the Great Tree Village. Hiraku is thrilled to get more workers and gladly accepts the offer. However, Tia warns him that all 20 of the volunteers are young women. Hiraku realizes his village is suffering from a massive demographic crisis since they have way too many women and hardly any men around. He agrees to accept the new residents, but strictly demands that Howling Village send at least 2 young men as well to help secure the village's future. A short time later, the new Beastkin residents arrive at the village carrying their belongings. A nervous Beastkin girl named Senna steps forward, introduces herself, and bows deeply. She tells Hiraku that they are all completely prepared to be used, however he sees fit as long as he promises not to abandon them. Hiraku tells her to relax and assures her that no one is going to kick them out or treat them like slaves. He tells them to take their time getting used to the village routine before deciding what kind of houses they want to build for themselves. Senna is overjoyed by his kindness and thanks him profusely for taking them in. Hiraku then remembers his condition and asks if she brought the men he specifically requested. Senna proudly confirms that she brought 3 males with her and steps aside to introduce them. She reveals 3 tiny little boys staring up at him. Hiraku just stares at the children in absolute disbelief. The elf girls look at the little boys and seriously start debating whether they can realistically wait 5 or 10 years for them to grow up just to solve the village's demographic problem. Hiraku sighs and realizes he will just have to rely on these children for the future of the village anyway. The new beastmen officially move into the village. Lemulius takes charge as their dedicated housing manager to help them settle in. However, the beastmen keep fainting all over the place. Hiraku quickly realizes they are just terrified of the giant spiders and wolves roaming freely around the settlement. He figures they will just have to get used to the environment since the monsters are friendly. Later, Hiraku watches Senna playing with the other beastkin children in the dirt. He notices she casts a glowing blue magic aura on one of the girls. Hiraku is completely surprised and asks if Senna can use magic. Senna cheerfully confirms that she can. Hiraku suddenly realizes he might actually be the only person in the entire village who cannot use magic. He thinks about how all the angels and high elves constantly use fire and water magic for their daily chores. He watches the maids and lizardmen magically water the crops with blue energy beams. Even the giant wolves and spiders easily extinguish fires with water magic. The bees use fire magic, and the slimes can magically duplicate themselves. Senna notices Hiraku feeling down and tries to comfort him. She kindly suggests they practice magic together. Hiraku appreciates the offer but decides not to worry about the impossible, and just focuses on what he can actually do physically. Suddenly, a massive earthquake shakes the village and sends dust flying. Gran Maria flies down and urgently reports that a giant grappler bear and a bloody viper are fighting intensely in the northern forest. She worries their violent battle will eventually destroy the area and affect the village. Hiraku immediately wonders if the monsters taste good. He hops on Gran Maria's back and she flies him straight into the sky. They spot the massive beasts tearing up the forest below. Hiraku asks Gran Maria to dive bomb the creatures. He drops down and instantly kills both the giant bear and the snake in one hit. The angels are absolutely amazed by his incredible strength and help him drag the massive carcasses back to the village. Hiraku takes the meat into the kitchen and starts preparing a huge feast. He uses their precious wine to braise the bear meat in a large pot. The maids freak out about wasting their valuable alcohol, but Hiraku assures them it is a perfectly normal cooking method. When he finally tastes the wine-braised bear, he finds it way too gamey to enjoy. Next, he decides to chop up the snake meat and deep fry it. He serves the crispy meat to the girls, and they absolutely love it. They excitedly tell him it tastes exactly like fried chicken. Hiraku tastes it and agrees, but he notes the dish is missing a side of mayonnaise to make it perfect. He visits Flora's lab to ask for an antibacterial agent to make the raw eggs in the mayonnaise safe to eat. Flora initially offers him a highly explosive pink potion that she claims will blast any microorganism over the mountain. Hiraku quickly rejects the dangerous explosive and asks for something safe to use in food. She hands him a bottle of clear medicine that works perfectly for cooking. Hiraku then asks about her progress with the miso production. Flora complains that she followed his instructions perfectly, but her hut blew up 3 times trying to ferment the soybean. Hiraku tells her that is definitely not supposed to happen. They decide to try making it together this time while keeping the explosives to a minimum. Hiraku returns to the kitchen and whips up a fresh batch of mayonnaise using raw eggs, salt, apple vinegar, and oil. He whisks the mixture together and serves it with the fried snake. Flora tastes the creamy mayonnaise and instantly falls in love with it. She asks if she can just eat it plain out of the bowl. Hiraku firmly scolds her and tells her it is terrible for her health to eat pure mayonnaise. After that, they start working on the complicated miso recipe. They boil a large pot of soaked soybeans and vigorously mash them in ceramic mortars. Hiraku then uses his almighty farming tool to magically create the necessary koi mold. He repeatedly chants a song about making mold while stirring the wooden tub. They mix the freshly made mold with salt, pack it tightly into wooden barrels, and carry it down to the cellar to age for a few months. Flora watches him and assumes her previous attempts failed simply because she forgot to chant the mold song while mixing. Hiraku highly doubts that was the problem but lets it slide. Just as they finish packing the barrels, Lasti comes down into the cellar and announces they have visitors waiting outside. Hiraku goes up to the main hall and finds a group of elder dwarves led by a man named Donovan. Donovan asks Hiraku to share the village's famous high-quality alcohol with them. Hiraku hesitates to just give their valuable wine away for free. Donovan clearly admits they do not have any money to pay for it, but he offers their advanced brewing technology in exchange. He promises his team can turn the village's amazing crops into the finest alcohol in the world. Hiraku instantly agrees to the deal. The dwarves immediately start working and set up copper distillation equipment. They process the harvested corn and create a batch of clear corn whiskey. Hiraku takes a small sip and violently coughs because it is incredibly strong. Donovan laughs loudly and calls the mayor a lightweight. The dwarves officially join the village as permanent brewers to keep the alcohol flowing. That night, Hiraku throws a massive welcome party in the tavern for the beastmen and the dwarves. Everyone drinks heavily and enjoys the massive feast. During the party, Hiraku sits with Donovan and asks if any of the young women in the village catch his eye. Donovan slowly strokes his thick beard and seriously explains that the girls are all way too young and inexperienced for him. He firmly states that he only likes women who can grow a thick beard. Hiraku pictures Donovan in a dress and feels completely weirded out by the dwarf's unique preferences. A few days later, Hiraku is out chopping wood in the forest when a massive black dragon suddenly appears in the sky. Hiraku thinks it is an enemy wyvern and prepares his weapon to protect the village. Suddenly, Drime and a massive white dragon show up in the sky as well. Hiraku almost blasts the white dragon with his magic, but Gucci jumps out of the bushes and begs him to stop. Gucci frantically explains that the white dragon is Grafaloon, Drime's wife, and the black dragon is Lastismoon, their daughter. Grafaloon lands and angrily explains that she thought Drime was having an affair because he kept sneaking out of their castle with rare treasury gifts and staying out all night. Drime frantically tries to explain that he only built a hidden house near the village so he could drink alcohol in peace without her nagging him. Grafaloon realizes her husband completely lacks the courage to actually cheat on her, so the misunderstanding is quickly cleared up. She apologizes to Hiraku for almost attacking the village in her rage. Hiraku forgives them and tells Drime to stop causing trouble when he drinks. After they leave the village, Grafaloon talks to Gucci privately about the village's terrifying military might. She points out that Hiraku's magic attack would have easily killed her if she had not managed to dodge it. She decides they need to keep a close eye on the village just in case. She orders her daughter Lasti to permanently move into the village and ensure their immense power is never used against the dragons. Lasti happily agrees to the mission and formally introduces herself to Hiraku. He easily accepts her into the village and assigns her to help the beastmen with the vegetable harvesting. Unfortunately, Lasti turns out to be absolutely terrible at normal daily chores. She accidentally crushes the delicate tomatoes, shatters entire stacks of plates, and completely blows up the apples with her uncontrolled magic. Her terrifying dragon presence also scares the wolves, cows, and chickens so badly that they completely stop producing milk and eggs. Hiraku realizes she is way too strong for physical labor and decides to make her the official village diplomat instead. A human merchant soon arrives at the village to buy fresh fruit. Lasti cheerfully staffs the market stall and offers him large boxes of strawberries, apples, persimmons, and watermelon. The merchant is absolutely terrified of dealing directly with a legendary dragon, so he sweats profusely and instantly agrees to buy everything she offers without a single complaint. Hiraku watches the one-sided exchange and realizes Lasti is completely perfect for the diplomatic job. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's dark castle, the Demon Lord and his generals hold an emergency meeting. Gratz and Randan panic after hearing the reports that the village has now officially recruited a dragon to their ranks. The Demon Lord decides he needs more information and sends his daughter Florum to spy on the village to assess their actual military strength. Florum confidently accepts the mission and flies straight to the village. She plans to easily gather the information using her advanced magic skills. When she arrives at the gate, Lasti warmly welcomes her. Florum is instantly shocked to come face to face with the infamous dragon Lastismoon. Lasti ignores her shock and takes her on a pleasant tour of the vineyard. Florum eventually uses the opportunity to sneak away and spy on the residents from the shadows. She quietly observes the village and spots heavily armed lizardmen, beastmen, and ogres working together. She also spots the wanted vampire Princess Lu freely mixing potions with Flora. Her panic steadily grows when she notices Tia and the killer angels actively patrolling the skies above. Florum hides behind a massive tree and spots a huge group of high elves, inferno wolves, and demon spiders moving through the forest. The sheer amount of military power concentrated in one place completely shatters her confidence as a top-tier magic user. She pulls out her map and wonders what kind of terrifying monster could possibly rule over such a massive army. As she aimlessly wanders through the forest, she bumps into Hiraku carrying a large hammer over his shoulder. He casually asks if she is lost. Florem gets extremely defensive and yells at the ordinary human to leave her alone. Later, she meets back up with Lasti inside the village tavern. Lasti casually mentions that the human she just met in the woods is actually the mayor who easily defeated her mother. Florem freezes in absolute horror as the realization hits her. She realizes she was incredibly rude to the most dangerous person in the entire forest. The next morning, Hiraku walks out to check on the cabbage fields and finds Florem eagerly helping Lasti with the heavy harvest. Florem spots him approaching and immediately bows deeply, while shouting an overly polite morning greeting. Hiraku finds her sudden change in attitude very weird but decides to just ignore it. While Florem is adjusting to her new life, the village faces a minor issue with the slime. Tia originally brought a small blue slime to the village to purify the wastewater and sewage. The creatures have quickly multiplied into various colors like red, yellow, green, and black. They seem completely harmless as they bounce around the village, until the girls discover that a single red slime managed to drink an entire barrel of their precious alcohol. The girls, including Lulacy, Tia, and the High Elves, are absolutely furious since the alcohol is shared property and took a long time to brew. They immediately hold a trial for the blushing slime to decide its punishment. Some of the elves suggest burning the creature with fire magic, while others want to leave it outside to dry out in the sun. Hiraku feels bad for the poor creature and suggests a short confinement instead to avoid barbaric options, but the girls refuse to let it off that easily because they highly value their alcohol. However, they soon realize that punishing a mindless slime probably won't teach it any lessons anyway. Hiraku eventually acquits the slime to calm everyone down, and from then on, the slimes are allowed to join everyone during their feasts and celebration. The season soon changes to autumn, bringing cooler weather and a massive harvest of fresh vegetables like cabbage, radishes, carrots, and sweet potatoes. Hiraku prepares a hearty hot pot filled with new types of mushrooms, leeks, and greens, and everyone gathers around the large wooden table to enjoy the warm meal. The Beastkin girls absolutely love the new flavors. While eating, Hiraku casually mentions that the hot pot would taste much better if they had seafood like cod, crab, monkfish, or kelp for broth. He explains the concept of chanko nabe to the group. Lulacy and Tia instantly get excited and use their magic screens to start researching ocean ingredients. Florem mentions that there is a port city called Shishato within the demonic kingdom that heavily trades in marine products. Lasti offers to fly there and asks Florem to introduce them to a local merchant she knows. They waste no time and head out with a few lizardmen to carry the goods. 3 days later, Michael Goroon, the president of the largest trading company in Shishato, arrives at the village to deliver the requested seafood. He presents crates of fresh fish resting on ice and promises to gather plenty of kelp for them, noting that his fishermen usually throw kelp back into the ocean because they don't know how to use it. Michael then outlines his 3 main goals for the visit. First, he wants to properly greet Hiraku and thank him for the business. Second, he wants to propose more opportunities for trading goods. Third, he wants to officially become the government purveyor for the village. Hiraku notes how direct Michael is, and Michael explains that the village's crops are incredibly valuable and enticing. He promises to secure massive profits for them if he handles their trade exclusively. They review his company's product list and have a successful negotiation. However, just as they are finishing up the talks, Drimes suddenly appears in the room behind Michael. Michael screams in absolute terror and quickly excuses himself, fleeing the village on Lasti's back. Hiraku figures it is a completely normal reaction to seeing a powerful dragon up close. Michael reflects on how his involvement with the village actually began. 3 days earlier, his young assistant informed him that some unexpected visitors requested him by name at his shop in Shishato without an appointment. Michael had a bad feeling, and his merchant intuition warned him of impending danger, but he decided to meet them anyway. He was completely shocked to find Florem, a high-ranking noble from the Chrome family, alongside Lasti. Lasti cheerfully introduced herself as a dragon, causing Michael to completely panic. Michael instantly realized the massive risks involved in trading with a dangerous dragon and a powerful noble. However, the lizardmen presented baskets full of incredibly rare and valuable shiny red apple. When Michael saw the legendary fruits, his merchant instincts completely took over. The potential profit heavily outweighed his fear, so he agreed to find the seafood they wanted, and even offered to deliver it personally. Lasty gave him a ride to the village, but upon arriving, Michael was horrified to discover the village was guarded by a giant demon spider, killer angels, a vampire princess, and inferno wolves. Despite surviving the terrifying encounter with a smile, Michael fears his body might not handle the stress of doing business with such a dangerous group. Back in the village, everyone enjoys a delicious seafood hot pot thanks to Michael's delivery, and Hiraku hopes they can get shrimp or squid next time. A few days later, Hiraku notices a massive white dragon with black horns flying in the sky above the forest. He assumes it is related to Drime. The three angel guards spot the dragon and try to stop it, but the dragon easily brushes them off, sending them spinning helplessly through the air, and causes a massive magical explosion in the woods. Believing the dragon wants a fight, Hiraku grabs his farming tool, transforms it into a solid wooden spear, and hurls it straight at the beast. The spear hits the dragon directly on the head, sending it crashing into the forest and kicking up a huge cloud of dust. Hiraku heads into the woods and finds a white-haired woman surrounded by his wolves. She quickly surrenders, but Hiraku demands to know why she burned part of the forest. The woman struggles to come up with a good excuse until Drime arrives in his human form and explains that she is his older sister, Hakuren. Hakuren angrily reveals that she came to the village to vent her frustrations. Drime apparently got drunk and suggested marrying Lasty to Hiraku in the future for the prosperity of their tribe. Hakuren is extremely jealous that her much younger niece might find a husband before she does, constantly complaining that she is 900 years older than Lasty. Hiraku firmly pats her head to calm her down and tells her she can visit but must clean up the mess she made. He forces her to move all the fallen logs to repair the forest damage. Later that night, Hakuren joins them in the tavern for dinner and quickly fits in with the rest of the villagers, eating meat skewers and drinking heavily. She asks about the games they play, so Hiraku introduces her to Mahjong. Hakuren demands that they bet something on the game to make it interesting, but since Hiraku doesn't have anything to wager, she suggests playing strip Mahjong as a punishment for the loser. Hiraku hesitates, not wanting to force anyone into it, but Lasty and Drime agree to the rules, confident they will never lose because of their intense dragon pride. As the game progresses, a sinister magical aura fills the room. Hakuren, Lasty, and Drime completely dominate the table, calling out their moves perfectly. Hiraku completely struggles and continuously loses his clothing piece by piece. He strongly suspects the dragons are using telekinesis or magic to see his tiles, but Hakuren holds up a blank tile to prove they are playing normally. Just as Hiraku believes he finally has a winning hand for a massive double Yakumen, he draws the exact wrong tile he needed. Hakuren easily steals the victory with a powerful electric aura, leaving Hiraku completely defeated and entirely shirtless. Hakuren and the other girls excitedly chant for him to take his pants off, and Hiraku accepts his humiliating loss. In the following days, Hakuren decides to stay permanently and takes over a room in the main cabin. However, she constantly complains about any physical labor Hiraku assigns her. When he forces her to dig holes and fill them back in, she gives up on the very first day. Realizing she is terrible at manual chores but surprisingly skilled at detail work, Hiraku makes her the official village teacher. She takes charge of teaching reading, writing, and math to the young beastkin children using drawings of apples on a wooden board. Hakuren openly tells the kids they need to study hard so she won't have to do any work in the future, proving her motivation is entirely selfish. Despite her terrible attitude, she turns out to be a highly capable instructor. Shortly after, a group of topless Lamia girls approaches the village and begs Hiraku to spare their lives. Hiraku is completely confused until Flowrum explains that the young wolf pups recently cleared out a nearby dungeon, accidentally forcing the Lamias to flee their home in absolute terror. Feeling responsible for his wolves' destructive actions, Hiraku agrees to protect them and trade fresh crops for the massive pile of blue magic crystals they mine. The Lamias are thrilled by the arrangement and present baskets of fresh fruits to seal the deal. However, Hiraku politely asks them to wear clothes when visiting the village because he finds their topless appearance incredibly distracting. The Lamias agree and quickly form a delivery service to transport the village's heavy trading goods. With the new trade routes and reliable neighbors, Hiraku feels the village is expanding to a new level and decides to clear more land to plant additional crops. Meanwhile, at the Demon Lord's castle, the generals receive terrifying reports that the ancient dragon Hakarin has permanently moved into the village. General Beazle and the others panic upon realizing the village now possesses enough military might to conquer an entire country. General Randon is so terrified of the growing threat that he leaves a resignation letter on his desk and completely flees the castle. Demon Lord Galgardo ignores the military threat and is more focused on his own family problems, noting his daughter is in a rebellious phase and barely speaks to him. However, Princess Yuri holds a secret meeting with her advisors in a dark castle tower. They inspect a magical map and are completely convinced the village is amassing military power for a foul purpose. They assume Florum is being held hostage to prevent the Demon Kingdom from retaliating. Yuri firmly decides they must gather their troops immediately and launch a full attack on the village to save Florum. Meanwhile, General Beazle secretly meets with Florum inside the village library to discuss an impending crisis. He informs her that Princess Yuri is currently gathering troops and preparing to go on a military campaign to attack the village. Florum is completely shocked and asks why Yuri would do something so absurd. Beazle explains that during Florum's absence, some of Yuri's followers took the opportunity to fill the princess's head with half-truths. Florum correctly guesses that the followers in question are the politically powerful noble trio consisting of the second daughter of the Gritch family, Rosalind, the fourth daughter of the Boogle family, Klakase, and the second daughter of the Mamonrose family, Rawaju. Florum angrily calls them simpletons and complains that she has already sent plenty of reports detailing how ridiculously powerful the village is. Beazle notes that her reports were so absurd that the nobles likely started to view them as unrealistic lies. He also mentions that he tried to have the Demon Lord put a stop to the invasion, but Galgardo is far too soft on his daughter to intervene. Florum realizes she needs to step in, but Beazle warns her that trying to convince them to stop directly would only cause the nobles to view her as an enemy of the demonic kingdom. Instead, he tasks her with stopping the invasion by showing the incoming army the massive difference in military might without actually mobilizing the village's forces, since a real battle would likely end with the violent destruction of the entire demonic kingdom. Florum agrees to the plan and asks when the army is mobilizing. She is horrified to learn that their forces, numbering 300 men, are marching tomorrow. The very next day, the three noble girls arrive in the forest near the village, fully expecting an easy conquest. However, their confidence shatters instantly when a massive, powerful magic beam strikes down from the sky, causing a huge explosion right in front of them. Terrified by the overwhelming display of power, the noble girls and their knights immediately throw their hands up and beg for mercy. Florum decides to spare their lives but forces the three girls to stay in the village and work as office assistants to pay for their transgressions. She casually mentions to Hiraku that the girls are from the demonic kingdom and are ready to work like their lives depend on it. The noble girls stand completely frozen in shock, looking pale and terrified. Hiraku feels bad for them, noting that they look like they have completely given up on life, but Florum assures him they will be fine. She also gives Hiraku strict instructions to dispose of the girls without hesitation if they do anything to harm the village, completely terrifying the nobles even further. Shortly after, Princess Yuri herself arrives at the village to check on the situation. Florum introduces Yuri to Hiraku and explains that she is just here to observe how things work in the village. Florum asks Hiraku not to give Yuri any special treatment and to put her to work just like everyone else, claiming she will only be known as plain old Yuri during her stay. Yuri happily agrees to the terms, noting that it has been a long time since anyone called her by her actual name. Florum then takes Yuri and the three noble girls on a comprehensive tour of the village. They walk through the vineyards and learn how the harvested grapes are turned into alcohol. They marvel at the lotus plants growing straight out of the water in the flooded fields. The girls are also completely fascinated by the large wooden water wheel, stunned to learn that it moves with the power of water instead of magic. The tour continues as they meet the local beastkin children and visit the massive apple orchards. The noble girls admit they have never seen apples growing on trees before, having only eaten them at fancy castle parties. The three nobles begin whispering among themselves, plotting to take over the village to secure its massive wealth and make it the biggest moneymaker for their kingdom. Florum overhears their greedy scheming and immediately threatens to dispose of them, quickly forcing the girls to abandon their conversation. Later, the group meets Lasti, who cheerfully introduces herself as a dragon. The noble girls are horrified to realize they are trapped in a village filled with legendary creatures, and quickly agree to wait for a chance to escape. However, their escape plans are permanently ruined that very night. While sneaking around the forest, they encounter two massive inferno wolves glaring at them with glowing red eyes. Before they can even process the danger, the giant spider Zabuton drops down and unleashes a massive burst of magical energy right in front of them. The sheer terror of facing these mythical monsters completely breaks their spirits. The next morning, the three girls humbly apologize to Florum and promise to work incredibly hard without any more rebellious thoughts. Florum puts them to work handling the town hall office duties, and the girls quickly prove to be highly capable assistants, successfully managing the massive mountains of paperwork. Florum decides to officially name them the Town Hall Girls. During her stay, Yuri spends time bonding with Florum and the animals. She even tries playing fetch with an inferno wolf, completely amazed by how tame the dangerous creatures act in the village. Yuri admits to Florum that she was totally ignorant of the outside world and feels terrible for trying to bring war to such a peaceful place. She acknowledges that anyone foolish enough to attack the village would inevitably face dragonfire. Yuri then angrily blames Florum for suddenly vanishing from the demonic kingdom without a word. She explains that she thought Florum had been taken hostage and felt incredibly hurt when Florum started treating her like a formal stranger instead of a childhood friend. Florum warmly apologizes for her distance and promises to keep Yuri updated on everything from now on. The two friends finally reconcile and head back to the lodge for dinner. As time passes, the noble girls adjust perfectly to their new lives, finding immense joy in the delicious meals and the relaxing hot baths, far away from stressful political conflict. Yuri surprises everyone by asking to help out with the manual farm labor. Despite the nobles begging her to stop doing commoner work, Yuri joins the beastkin in harvesting root vegetables and golden wheat. After a long day of farming, they all enjoy a hearty stew together. Eventually, the time comes for Yuri to return to the demonic kingdom. She stands before the villagers and politely thanks them for their hospitality. The beastkin present her with a large basket of freshly baked bread and biscuits made from the wheat they harvested together. Florum and Hiraku tell Yuri to come visit anytime. Yuri then turns to her three noble companions and asks if they are coming home with her. The three girls completely refuse, stuffing their faces with snacks and insisting that they still have too much to learn and too much work to do in the village to leave just yet. Yuri accepts their decision and teleports back home. Upon returning to the castle, Yuri throws herself into her political duties. General Beazle reports to Demon Lord Galgardo that Yuri has completely changed since her trip, acting much more dignified and busy. Galgardo complains that his daughter barely makes time for him anymore, and suddenly panics, assuming she must have met a man during her travel. Consumed by rage, Galgardo summons a massive pillar of dark magic and vows to tear the man apart himself. Beazle quickly steps in to calm the furious father down, warning him that his aggressive attitude will only make Yuri hate him eventually. Meanwhile, back at the village, the residents complete their pre-winter harvest and are completely shocked by the massive surplus of crops, especially the giant radishes. Since they have far more food than they can store, Lasti suggests sending the extra crops to her grandfather, the Emperor Dragon Doze, and her grandmother, the Hurricane Dragon Raymalin. Hiraku is surprised to learn the dragons are all connected and agrees to the plan. Lasti first stops by Drimes Mountain to drop off his share, and then flies out to Shashado City to deliver goods to the merchant Michael. During her visit, Michael asks Lasti for a huge favor, requesting that she exterminate a massive sea monster that has been destroying his trade ships. Lasti eagerly accepts the bounty and obliterates the sea monster with a massive pillar of magic. She returns to the village with the monster's meat as a reward. Hiraku inspects the tentacles and realizes it is the legendary Chanko seafood Michael had mentioned before, prompting him to prepare a massive seafood hot pot for the entire village. Following this, the ancient dragon Hakuren heads north to deliver crops to the other dragon. On her way back, she stumbles upon a group of mountain elves and brings them to the village. The leader of the group, Ya, introduces herself and explains that her people are struggling to survive in the mountains because food has become incredibly scarce. Hiraku gladly welcomes the dark-skinned elves to the village and offers them a permanent home. Ya is determined to prove her worth and boasts that her people are excellent hunters. However, the moment she tries to hunt in the forest, she accidentally triggers a rope net trap and gets launched into the air alongside a rabbit. Shortly after, she triggers another trap and gets caught in a wooden cage with a wild boar. Feeling completely useless and deeply apologetic, Ya approaches Hiraku and asks if she can try making pottery for the village instead. Hiraku helps her build a small outdoor kiln and teaches her the firing process, but the local soil simply crumbles into ash when baked. Refusing to give up, Ya volunteers to explore the surrounding forest to find proper clay. Her search is a massive success, and she soon presents Hiraku with beautifully crafted jars, cups, and plates, officially establishing a pottery workshop in the village. Around the same time, Ya discovers the entrance to a brand new dungeon up in the northern mountains. The High Elves request permission to send a survey party to investigate the area. Hiraku agrees but urges them to be careful. A squad consisting of elves, a lizard man, and 2 inferno wolves heads out. While they are gone, the villagers finally finish constructing a dedicated men's bathhouse so Hiraku, the dwarves, the lizard men, and Drime can bathe in peace. Hiraku happily enjoys the hot spring with the beastskin pups. However, Florem soon catches 3 female attendants trying to sneak into the men's bathhouse. The girls nervously claim they just wanted to wash Hiraku's back to get closer to him. Florem delivers a terrifyingly calm scolding, warning them that trying to use underhanded tactics to raise their social standing will result in immediate disposal. Shortly after, the survey team returns from the northern dungeon and reports that they found a dangerous blood viper inside. The High Elves immediately demand to form an extermination party to secure the monster's meat. They aggressively explain to a very confused Hiraku that blood viper meat is incredibly valuable because it vastly improves vitality, enhances husband and wife relations, and blesses couples with children. The dark-skinned elf gets so worked up explaining the reproductive benefits that her face turns completely red with embarrassment. Hiraku gets a bit flustered by their intense enthusiasm and decides to postpone the hunt until they can discuss it with the entire village, noting that winter is already approaching. The season quickly changes, and the weather grows cold. One evening, Hiraku walks into the main cabin and is completely surprised to find Lulusi completely bedridden. Florem and Tia are already by her side checking on her. Lulusi brushes off the concern, claiming she likely just caught a mild cold because she is experiencing slight nausea and a low fever. Hiraku gets extremely worried and considers trying to mix some medicine for her, even though he has no real experience making it. Florem suddenly asks Lulusi if she has been craving sour foods lately. Lulusi admits that her regular appetite is completely gone, but she still finds herself eagerly eating tomatoes and other fruits. Florem points out that someone over in Howling Village recently reported experiencing those exact same symptoms. Lulusi asks what eventually happened to the sick person. Hiraku's eyes widen as he pieces the clues together, and he quietly reveals that the villagers simply congratulated the person on having a baby. Lulusi gasps as the realization finally hits her, completely stunned to discover that she is pregnant with Hiraku's child. The following day, Hiraku notes that the entire village is in a joyous uproar after discovering Lu is pregnant. Lu herself remains incredibly calm and reassures Hiraku that everything will be fine. Because of her pregnancy, she is no longer able to use her magic to transform into her smaller childlike form, but she happily embraces the change without any complaints. Hiraku constantly checks in on her well-being and then begins his daily morning routine. He purposefully wakes up a bit later than the rest of the staff to give the maids a chance to rest, though they still insist on waking up early to prepare everything for the day. When he steps out into the main hall, the head maid Anne and the others greet him with their daily reports. One of the horned maids mentions that the wine slime successfully snuck into the food storage area during the night and completely drained an entire barrel of wine. Hiraku reveals that this was actually a decoy barrel they intentionally left out to distract the slime and protect the rest of the supply, so he considers the security plan a massive success. Hiraku then heads to the dining hall for breakfast. Since the village has grown so large, they have to split breakfast into 3 separate groups to fit everyone. The first group includes Hiraku, Lu, and Flora. During the meal, Flora looks completely exhausted with heavy dark bags under her eyes. She mutters to herself about counting microorganisms and admits she has not been sleeping at all because she is completely obsessed with perfecting their miso fermentation process. She holds up a flask of mysterious pink liquid, entirely convinced she just needs to add more to the batch. Hiraku gently begs her to stop working and get some actual rest. The second group to eat is the large team of maids, and the third group consists of anyone who wakes up late, like Hakuren. After breakfast, Gran Maria arrives to deliver a formal security report. She informs Hiraku that a group of 3 killer rabbits tried to infiltrate the village borders, but Kuro and the other dogs quickly eliminated them before they could cause any trouble. Hiraku is grateful for the security team and notes that the rabbits provide excellent meat for their meals. He reflects that while the angels are incredibly lazy off-duty and rely completely on the lizardmen and maids to clean their clothes and cook for them, they absolutely make up for it by working incredibly hard to keep the village safe from outside threats. Hiraku then heads outside to do his daily farm work. He greets Kuro and checks on the giant spider Zabuton and her kids before heading to the massive crop field. He summons his magical farming tool and uses it to till the soil and water the growing plants. The tool also acts as a perfect pest control method, automatically eliminating the weird fuzzy black bugs that try to eat the crops whenever he uses it as a watering can. Hiraku feels a deep sense of satisfaction seeing the massive eggplants, beans, and gourds growing so perfectly. Soon, lunchtime arrives. Hiraku sits under the giant tree with Lu, Tia, and his other companions to eat the bento boxes the maids prepared. The newer villagers, like the High Elves and Beastkin, are still completely shocked that they get to eat a meal in the middle of the day. In their past lives, they constantly starved and worried about food, so eating 3 massive meals a day feels like an impossible luxury. They even panic and assume they will get kicked out of the village for depleting the food reserves. But Hiraku assures them that they will never have to worry about going hungry as long as they live in his village. During the lunch break, Daga approaches Hiraku and reports that the cows have successfully given birth to new calves, asking for permission to increase their daily feed allotment. Hiraku quickly approves the request. Florim then mentions that their crop storage rooms are almost completely full, so they decide to talk to the merchant Michael about selling their massive surplus to the outside world. After finishing his meal, Hiraku gets right back to work. Since he has plenty of help with the regular farming chores, he focuses on using his almighty farming tool to till brand new fields and plant decorative flowers like yellow tulips to add some color and make the village feel more civilized. He also uses the tool's magical crafting abilities to act as a carpenter, easily carving small wooden blocks, toys, and furniture for the villagers despite having no actual construction experience. Later in the afternoon, Hiraku joins the villagers for their daily martial arts training. Anne strongly advised everyone to hold regular combat practice, and the girls use it as a way to burn off calories since they eat so much delicious food every single day. Hiraku tries swinging a wooden sword against a training dummy but quickly gets completely exhausted and out of breath. Ya, the dark-skinned mountain elf, shows up and perfectly throws several small knives into the dummy with incredible precision. Hiraku tries to copy her technique but fails miserably, realizing he is completely untalented with normal weapons. However, when he grabs his magical spear, he accidentally unleashes a massive blast of glowing energy that completely obliterates the top of the dummy, shocking everyone around him. As the sun sets, Hiraku heads back to the main lodge for dinner. Anne presents a brand new experimental dish of simmered killer rabbit covered in a sweet honey sauce. Hiraku asks how confident she is in the new recipe, and she admits she is only 20% sure it is actually good. He takes a bite and finds it overwhelmingly sweet, but Anne strictly forbids wasting any food, so he forces himself to finish the entire meal with a strained smile. During dinner, the villagers share general news and updates. Florim reads a letter from Princess Yuri, who demands more of their delicious apples, and casually requests another custom dress. Hiraku feels bad about Yuri making so many demanding requests, but Zabuton is actually completely thrilled to make more clothes for her, so he lets it slide. After dinner, Hiraku relaxes in the newly built men's bathhouse, enjoying the hot spring all to himself while the girls splash around in their own separate bathhouse. When he finally returns to his room to sleep, he feels a constant unnerving presence watching him from the shadows. He suddenly realizes the elf girls have built hidden trapdoors in his wooden floor, walls, and ceiling to secretly guard him at night. He catches them spying on him, and they immediately scatter and retreat into the walls. Hiraku decides to just seal the hidden doors the next day and peacefully goes to sleep, thanking God for his happy new life. The very next day, Hiraku goes to check on the dwarf brewery. Donovan and his crew take their alcohol production incredibly seriously, strictly refusing to drink on the job to avoid any accidents or fires. When Donovan tastes a new batch of clear sake, he immediately deems it garbage and marks the glass flask with a large black cross. However, he refuses to throw the bad booze away, deciding to distill it further and mix it with fruit juice to salvage the batch. Donovan then approaches Hiraku and asks him to triple the amount of grapes they harvest so they can make even more wine. Hiraku agrees and heads out to expand the vineyard. Suddenly, Senna runs up to him in a total panic, sweating profusely and looking completely terrified. She reports that a strange man completely bypassed Granmaria's aerial patrols and Zabuton's webs to enter the village undetected. Hiraku rushes over to the massive tree and finds a brown-haired man in a red coat prostrating himself on the dirt floor in front of the wooden shrine Hiraku built for God. Lu arrives on the scene and happily greets the man, revealing that he is Vargreif, the progenitor of the vampires and essentially her grandfather. Everyone heads to the dining hall to talk things over. Vargreif explains that he is around 4,000 years old and manages to stay sane by magically erasing his memories every few centuries. He heard about Lu's miraculous pregnancy and came to check on her in person. He apologizes for sneaking in, explaining that he was entirely drawn to the wooden statue by the massive tree. Vargreif explains that he actually met the creator when he was first born, but he eventually forgot what God looked like due to his memory-erasing magic. When he saw Hiraku's statue, he recognized the perfect likeness immediately and felt completely overwhelmed by its divine presence. Vargreif acts incredibly jealous that the village gets to live near such a masterpiece, heavily hinting that he desperately wants it. Hiraku explains that the statue belongs to the village and cannot be moved, but he gladly offers to carve a brand new one specifically for Vargreif. The progenitor is absolutely thrilled by the offer. Hiraku quickly carves a new wooden statue of God and presents it to Vargreif, who completely loves the craftsmanship. Vargreif tries to pay for the masterpiece, but Hiraku refuses the money, stating that God is not something to be sold or traded. Vargreif accepts the gift, promises to repay the massive favor in another way, and bids everyone a warm farewell. Vargreif immediately travels to the grand cathedral of his religion and meets with the elderly head priest. He presents the new statue and orders the priest to place it in the most prominent spot on the altar, entirely replacing their most famous and beloved ancient sculpture crafted by a legendary master. The priest is shocked but complies with the order. Vargreif also commands the entire religion to quietly support Hiraku and the Great Tree Village from the shadows, without ever doing anything to disturb Hiraku's peaceful life. Back at the village, Hiraku suddenly sneezes, completely unaware of the massive religious shift he just caused across the world. A few days later, a magnificent black and gold grand piano arrives at the village as a pregnancy gift from Vargreif. The villagers place it in the dining hall, but the noble Beastkin girls are completely terrified to even touch it, knowing it is an incredibly expensive instrument usually reserved for grand ceremonies at major temples. They beg Hiraku for a cheap practice piano so they do not accidentally break the priceless gift and ruin their lives. Hiraku asks Michael to procure a normal piano for them. Once it arrives, Florem and the demon girls easily play beautiful music, and the rest of the villagers happily practice on the cheaper instrument to improve their skills. However, the villagers become so obsessed with practicing that they play non-stop into the dead of night, leaving Hiraku tossing and turning in his bed, deeply regretting his decision as the loud piano music keeps him wide awake. Spring finally passes, and the sun begins to shine much brighter over the Great Tree Village, making all the newly grown vegetables like the eggplants, cucumbers, and tomatoes look incredibly vibrant and colorful after soaking up the rays. Hiraku takes a quick break from carefully pruning the tops of his massive heavy tomato plants to join the girls for lunch out in the lush green fields. Lu uses her ice magic to drop glowing blue cubes into their drinks to cool them down, and she gently scolds Hiraku for wanting to rush back to work, reminding him that he needs to take proper breaks so he does not end up collapsing from exhaustion. Hiraku notes that she is the one who should really be careful since she is heavily pregnant, but Lu assures him that the other village girls actually told her that getting some light, regular exercise is vital for maintaining a healthy pregnancy. She mentions that some of the ogre maids have successfully given birth before, which makes her feel much more reassured about the entire daunting process. When Hiraku asks how she is physically feeling, Lu admits that carrying the baby feels exactly like hauling around two incredibly heavy heads of cabbage, prompting the other girls to eagerly wonder if the baby will end up being a boy or a girl. They all offer to help her out with her daily tasks, but Lu insists her appetite is completely back to normal, and she feels perfectly fine. Her only real complaint is that she is absolutely miserable because she cannot drink any alcohol while she is pregnant, a revelation that totally stresses out the giant spider Zabuton, who just wants her to be as comfortable as possible. Later on, 3 of the blonde angel knights approach Hiraku in the main lodge and drop to their knees in absolute desperation. They explain that they all made a firm, collective resolution to give up drinking alcohol in complete solidarity with Lu, but their resolve is rapidly crumbling. Every single time they sit down to eat some delicious fried food, they cannot stop thinking about how perfectly a cold drink would pair with the meal, and the constant temptation is driving them insane. They literally beg Hiraku to just sell off the entire alcohol supply in the village, so they will not have to suffer through the massive cravings anymore. Hiraku is glad they care so much about Lu, but he absolutely refuses to get rid of their hard-earned booze. He explains that alcohol actually tastes much better the longer it sits and ages in the wooden barrels, so he encourages the suffering knights to just tough it out for now, so they can enjoy an even better, aged drink later. Meanwhile, Donovan and his fellow bearded dwarves are incredibly depressed. They approach Hiraku outside and ask if they did something to offend the village, explaining that absolutely no one is drinking a single drop of their meticulously crafted alcohol anymore. Hiraku realizes the dwarves have absolutely no idea about the village-wide alcohol ban, so he quickly apologizes and explains that everyone is just fasting in solidarity for Lu. Knowing that the villagers still love their brew, Donovan instantly gets his confidence back, and Hiraku suggests they actually ramp up their brewing production, so they have plenty of aged wine ready for when everyone finally breaks their fast. As Lu gets much closer to her due date, she decides to stay inside the cabin all day to avoid the harsh, sweltering sunlight. The villagers constantly drop by her room to bring her various gifts to make her more comfortable. Tia and the angels bring her a glowing white flower they found on a snowy mountain that constantly releases cold air to keep the room perfectly chilled. Ya, the mountain elf, brings a small glass jar of secret medicinal green herbs meant to heavily boost health, treating the jar like a super rare item. A horned blonde demon girl drops off a magic recovery pendant she happily took from her father's massive treasure room, and Anne the maid brings a freshly made, glossy custard pudding covered in rich caramel sauce. Another elf makes her a beautiful floral good luck wreath, and Flora happily serves her a warm bowl of homemade tomato and tofu miso soup. Daga the lizard man even shows up and completely panics because he hatches from an egg and has absolutely no idea how mammalian birth actually works. Wanting to help in any way he can, he offers his own blood for Lu to drink so she can gain extra strength, but she politely declines his intense offer since her teeth cannot even pierce his incredibly thick green scales. That evening, as the sun sets and casts a warm glow over the cabin, Lu rests in bed and tells Hiraku how incredibly happy she is to receive so much overwhelming support from the community. She notices a wooden mallet tied with a white ribbon sitting among her piles of gifts, mentioning that Donovan gave it to her and promised it would definitely come in handy later. Suddenly, Lu clutches her stomach in intense pain, realizing the baby is finally coming. The entire wooden lodge immediately erupts into chaos as the maids run around frantically tending to the fireplaces, boiling huge pots of water, and carrying massive stacks of clean white towels. With nothing left to do to help, Hiraku is forced to wait outside the room, pacing nervously and feeling completely helpless. He steps outside the lodge and looks up at the 2 glowing moons hanging in the starry night sky. He reflects deeply on his very first night in this world, remembering how he originally just wanted to live entirely alone, far away from anyone else. Now he is surrounded by a massive caring family, and the realization brings him a deep sense of peace despite his anxiety. The night passes in an exhausting blur, and when morning finally arrives, the girls happily announce that the delivery was a total success. Hiraku rushes into the bright room and finds Lu perfectly healthy, with a lavender-haired elf tenderly cradling a tiny newborn wrapped in a soft white blanket. The girls tell Hiraku to come hold his son, strictly warning him to carefully support the baby's fragile neck. Hiraku nervously takes the infant, completely amazed by how warm and heavy he feels despite being so incredibly small. When the baby suddenly squints and smiles up at him, it finally hits Hiraku that he is truly a father. Remembering how much he suffered from a horrible terminal illness in his past life, Hiraku silently vows to raise his son to be incredibly strong so he never has to experience that kind of pain. Lu smiles warmly and corrects him, saying they will raise him to be strong together as a family. A week passes, and the village settles back into its normal bustling routine. Hiraku reveals that Lu decided to name the boy Alfred, and despite being half vampire, the baby looks like a completely normal human for now. As Hiraku works in the fields with his almighty farming tool, he looks at the massive ancient tree in the center of the village and reflects on how much the settlement has physically grown. What started as a solo survival camp has heavily expanded into a massive community with huge wooden lodges, flooded rice paddies, and countless diverse residents. Wanting to formally thank everyone for their hard work in building up the village, Hiraku decides it is finally time to implement a brand new currency system. He gathers Lu, Tia, and the others in the lodge and presents them with a small silver coin embossed with a tree emblem, calling it a reward medal. He explains that as the village population keeps rapidly increasing, it has become borderline impossible for him to personally manage and distribute every single crop, piece of hunted meat, and traded good. He wants people to start trading for what they want using the medals, instead of relying entirely on him. When one of the elves suggests they just continue trading goods directly with each other, Hiraku points out that bartering is way too complicated because everyone values things entirely different. He asks them how many strawberries a single apple is worth, and the girls immediately give conflicting answers based on their own personal taste. The dragon girls even chime in, completely misunderstanding the basic concept of money, and asking how many barrels of gold an apple is worth. To avoid causing sudden economic turmoil in the village, Hiraku decides to introduce the medals slowly, treating them like convenient exchange vouchers for now. He gives 3 medals to every single villager and 30 medals to Kuro and Zabuton, so they can share them with their massive animal families. Since he has to mint every single coin by hand using his magic tool to absolutely prevent counterfeiting, he cannot make too many at once. The villagers react to the new currency in totally different ways. The thirsty dwarves immediately trade their medals for extra wine, the elves buy custom-made furniture, and the angel knights purchase magical weapons that the dragons previously brought as gifts. Some villagers just keep the shiny coins to decorate their rooms. However, the system quickly backfires on Hiraku when custom-made wooden furniture and toys become incredibly popular. He ends up doing way more physical work than before, spending all his time vigorously chopping wood and carving tiny stools just to keep up with the overwhelming demand from the wolves and spiders. At one point, Senna the Beastskin girl runs up to Hiraku in tears, practically begging him to give her a baby in exchange for her 3 reward medals. Hiraku completely rejects the ridiculous offer, so she settles for renting his time for a single day instead. Soon after, the village throws a massive outdoor feast under the purple twilight sky to properly celebrate Alfred's birth. Everyone gathers around the glowing campfires, cheering loudly and toasting with overflowing wooden tankards. Lu feels a little bad for making everyone wait so long for the party, but she is mostly worried that they will drink entirely too much. Since Lu is breastfeeding, she still cannot drink any alcohol at all, so Donovan steps in with a special surprise. He brings out a massive wooden barrel marked with special symbols and tells Hiraku and Lu that he brewed this specific batch just for them to celebrate. Realizing what Donovan's wooden mallet gift from earlier was actually for, Lu and Hiraku grab the ribbon-tied mallet and smash the barrel open together, sending a huge splash of deep red wine into the air. The crowd absolutely loses their minds and the party kicks into high gear. Later that night, Donovan approaches Hiraku and Lu by the campfire. Knowing Lu cannot drink yet, Donovan suggests that before the drunk villagers completely drain the special barrel, they should bottle the rest of it up and age it safely. He promises to keep it secure so it will be the best wine ever by the time Alfred is old enough to drink it. Hiraku loves the idea and eagerly looks forward to the distant day he can share a drink with his son. Meanwhile, Flora happily plays with the sleeping baby, joking that Alfred loves her so much he probably wants to be her baby instead, which prompts the others to quickly shut her down. Far away from the peaceful village, Demon Lord Galgardo holds a serious meeting with his top generals in a grand castle overlooking the mountain. They discuss the news of Hiraku's new baby, and finally come to the undeniable conclusion that challenging the Great Tree Village is entirely impossible, given their massive accumulated power. One of the noblemen suggests that the only way to guarantee their safety is to maintain an amicable relationship by marrying someone from the demonic kingdom into the village. Galgardo absolutely loses his temper, leaning over the table and furiously screaming that he will never hand over his precious daughter Yuri to anyone, completely rejecting the diplomatic marriage idea. Elsewhere, the merchant Michael prepares a lavish collection of congratulatory gifts, knowing he must keep his business relationship with the village absolutely perfect. Back at the Great Tree Village, Tia approaches Hiraku with some pressing news. She explains that Dryme and her father sent word that over 100 refugees, including people displaced by the violent war with the Fullheart Kingdom, are desperately looking for a new place to live. Realizing that their current settlement is way too small to take in 3 digits worth of new people, Hiraku makes a quick decision. He announces that they will just have to build an entirely new settlement called Great Tree Village 2 to accommodate everyone. The female adventurers and villagers excitedly cheer in support, completely ready to do whatever it takes to help the refugees and continue expanding their happy community. The villagers immediately start preparing for the massive influx of immigrants. Knowing that over 100 refugees are on their way, Hiraku and the girls quickly decide they need to build an entirely new village just to house them all. Everyone pitches in to help with the preparations, focusing heavily on gathering enough preserved foods to feed the new arrivals. They form hunting parties to track down more meat in the forest, bringing back massive boars to stock up their food reserves. Back in the village, Anne and the other ogre maids prioritize cooking ingredients that spoil quickly, preparing massive amounts of vegetable pita sandwiches to easily feed the workers while they build the new settlement. Meanwhile, the administrative side of the village is completely falling apart. Rosalind, Roaju, and Klakasi are drowning under towering mountains of parchment scrolls in the village office. They are desperately trying to keep track of all the incoming food and construction supplies, but the workload is simply too much for the 3 civil servant girls to handle. Floram notices their extreme exhaustion and brings in a group of female students from the Demon Kingdom to act as reinforcement. The new girls initially think they are just here for a fun trip, excitedly asking about the all-you-can-eat apples and the chance to pet the village animals like Zabaton and the horned wolves. Floram quickly shuts down their vacation dreams and puts them straight to work, sorting the massive piles of administrative documents. With the paperwork finally under control, Gran Maria flies ahead to scout a suitable location for the new settlement. She returns and reports that the surrounding area is completely safe. Hiraku and a pink-haired elf head out to inspect the site, deciding to build the new village downstream and across the river from the Great Tree Village. They choose this location specifically for defensive purposes, reasoning that if the new immigrants ever stage a rebellion, placing them across the river will prevent them from easily taking control of the main village's water supply. Finding a prominent tree to serve as the center of the new settlement, they begin clearing the land and making a path connecting the 2 villages. The elf girls and Daga the lizard man try to cut down the incredibly hard trees in the area, but their weapons and magic barely leave a scratch. Hiraku steps in and easily summons his almighty farming tool in the form of an axe, slicing through the massive trunks with a single swing. Using his tool, he quickly clears the proposed site and easily processes the timber into usable logs. To ensure the new village has proper infrastructure, Hiraku builds a sturdy wooden bridge across the river, deliberately keeping it narrow so massive monsters cannot easily cross it. He also digs a canal from upstream to create a reliable water reservoir and sets up a dedicated material processing site to handle all the newly cut lumber. The spiders assist by managing the area while Hiraku takes a brief break to carve a small wooden statue of Zabaton. Lou drops by with baby Alfred to check on him, gently scolding Hiraku for working so hard and reminding him to take a rest. Hiraku agrees and spends a quiet moment relaxing with his family before getting back to the construction. With the foundation laid and the materials prepared, the elves and lizardmen start assembling the new houses. They use pre-planned blueprints to sort the long and short planks, relying heavily on the elves' green magic to quickly lift the heavy wooden beams and snap the walls into place. Hiraku watches them work efficiently and remembers how much he struggled to build his very first small hut all by himself without any nails or help. Anne and the maids frequently visit the construction site, serving hot bowls of salmon and vegetable soup to keep everyone energized during the heavy labor. The lizardmen hammer pegs into the roofs while the elves toss wooden boards to each other, prompting a quick safety warning to stop throwing heavy lumber around the work site. Thanks to everyone's combined efforts, the new village quickly takes shape with rows of sturdy wooden houses ready for the incoming refugees. However, their peaceful progress is suddenly interrupted when Drime frantically contacts the village. Before Hiraku can even properly prepare, Drime uses teleportation magic and abruptly arrives in the forest, bringing the first wave of refugees directly to the village. Drime explains that he sent a wyvern messenger ahead, but he traveled so fast he actually beat the messenger there. Hiraku expects standard human refugees, but he is completely shocked to see Gordon leading a group of 72 massive minotaurs. Gordon explains that they were driven out of their mountain village and got stranded on the road until Drimey rescued them. Seeing that the minotaurs are exhausted and starving, Hiraku immediately has the maids serve them bowls of warm porridge. Wanting to make sure their new residents are comfortable, Hiraku asks Nerf the lizard man to gather their opinions, since Nerf previously lived alongside minotaurs in the mountain. The minotaurs express their preference for the cool mountain breeze, but otherwise, they are just grateful to have food and shelter. Hiraku feels relieved and decides to show them to the newly built wooden cabins. His relief vanishes the moment the massive minotaurs try to step inside. The houses are built to standard human proportions, making them incredibly cramped and completely unusable for the giant demi-humans. Realizing his mistake, Hiraku is forced to temporarily house the 72 minotaurs inside the main village's large guest house until they can figure out a better solution. Just as Hiraku processes this major setback, Florim receives an urgent message from her father Bezel. Bezel also used teleportation magic to evacuate a large group of refugees from the war zone and drops them off at the village before quickly leaving to rest. Hiraku goes to greet the new arrivals and is stunned to find a group of 100 centaurs waiting for him. A brown-haired centaur named Gruwald steps forward and haughtily introduces herself as a relative of the Viscount Beeg family from the Demon Kingdom. She acts incredibly rude, demanding that Hiraku treat her with the utmost respect and getting angry when he stays silent in confusion. Hiraku is completely baffled by her aristocratic attitude since he knows nothing about noble etiquette. Before the situation can escalate, Lashashi Droy, one of the new civil servant girls from the Demon Kingdom, steps in to handle the arrogant centaur. Lashashi introduces herself as the daughter of Count Droy, a noble rank significantly higher than a mere Viscount's relative. She politely but firmly puts Gruwald in her place, warning her that she is acting incredibly rude to the people offering them asylum. Realizing she is heavily outranked and has deeply offended her hosts, Gruwald panics and immediately drops to the ground in a desperate, prostrate apology, begging for mercy. Lashashi agrees to take charge of managing the centaurs since she understands the noble hierarchy, completely saving Hiraku from dealing with the political headache. With the centaurs now behaving, Hiraku leads them to the new village, hoping the houses will work for them. Unfortunately, the centaurs' lower horse bodies make it completely impossible for them to fit inside the small cabins. Gruwald desperately asks if Lu can use her magic to shrink them down, but Lu confirms that her shrinking ability is unique and cannot be used on others. With the main guest house already packed full of minotaurs, Hiraku has no choice but to rent out space in the village cowsheds to give the centaurs a temporary place to sleep. Hiraku wonders if any more large demi-humans are going to show up, but his next group of immigrants is completely different. The Lamii find a group of young women wandering aimlessly through the dangerous monster-filled forest and escort them directly to the village. The women have green hair, wear matching dresses, and are led by a representative named Igu, who carries a small, smiling tree stump with a face. Igu introduces her group as the Nunu Daphne, a rare race of tree spirits capable of transforming into plants to avoid monster attacks. She explains that the talking tree stump is essentially a portable companion for them. They were forced to leave their flooded hometown and crossed the dangerous death forest on foot after hearing about the Great Tree Village from Michael the Merchant. Hiraku offers to throw a large banquet to welcome them and asks what kind of fruit or food they prefer to eat. Igu declines the food, explaining that as tree spirits they do not eat normal meals. Instead, they only require clean water, bright sunlight, and good soil. They specifically came to the village because Michael told them the soil here is incredibly fertile. Hiraku shows them to an empty tilled field, and the tree spirits are absolutely thrilled by the fragrant dirt. Igu places the tree stump on the ground, and it instantly sprouts a beautiful white flower, showing how perfect the environment is. Hiraku then offers to show them to the newly built wooden houses, eagerly suggesting they can make the windows bigger to let in more sunlight. However, the tree spirits flatly refuse to live indoors. They explain that they heavily prefer to stay outdoors, where they can be completely exposed to the elements, including the rain. As night falls over the village, Hiraku surveys the absolute disaster of his housing plan. He built an entire second village specifically for the new immigrants, but not a single one of them is actually using it. The massive minotaurs are crammed into the main village buildings. The centaurs are sleeping in the cowsheds, and the tree spirits are literally just standing motionless, out in the middle of the farming fields under the moonlight. The brand new wooden houses they spent all week carefully constructing are sitting completely empty and abandoned in the dark forest. Realizing that standard human houses are completely useless for their diverse new population, Hiraku gathers everyone back in the packed main lodge. Despite her extreme exhaustion from the previous days of construction, the lavender-haired elf groans and prepares for another massive project. Hiraku announces that they need to completely rethink their architectural designs from scratch. They must immediately start gathering more lumber and begin constructing absolutely massive buildings specifically tailored to fit the large bodies of 72 minotaurs and 100 centaurs. The girls enthusiastically agree to the new massive workload, completely determined to build the perfect homes for all their new residents, no matter how big the houses need to be. To make things right, Hiraku meets with Gordon Gruwald and Igu inside his cabin to formally apologize for not having suitable homes ready for their people upon arrival. He asks for their patience and cooperation while he gets their respective groups settled in. Gruwald is overly deferential, kneeling and acting like she is nothing more than a speck of house dust in his presence. Hiraku is uncomfortable with the extreme submissiveness and asks everyone to drop the formalities, insisting they should all just relax since they live together now. To help them adjust to their new environment, he assigns specific guides for each race. The muscular lizardman Narf takes charge of the minotaurs, the demon noble Lashashi is put in charge of the centaurs, and a beast woman named Mam is assigned to help the new Daphne. Mam nervously introduces herself, eager to prove she can handle the responsibility after being recommended for a higher level position. Hiraku then explains that the original village was built solely for human-sized residents, making the houses far too small. He decides it is absolutely necessary to build completely separate villages to comfortably accommodate the giant minotaurs and centaurs. They use the scouting reports from Leia and the other elves to select 3 prime locations in the surrounding forest. To connect the new settlements, Hiraku plans out a route for roads and irrigation channels. Recognizing that clearing the dense evergreen forest by hand will take forever, he asks for volunteers to help cut down the massive trees. The dragons Hakurin and Lasti eagerly step up to the task. They unleash devastating blasts of magical energy, vaporizing entire rows of trees in an instant. Lasti punches the air to fire a massive pink beam, completely obliterating the landscape and leaving a scorched path of destruction in her wake. Hiraku is absolutely horrified by the sheer scale of the damage, fearing they will wipe out the entire forest if they keep going. He frantically begs them to take it easy and stop using their full power. Realizing dragon magic is far too dangerous, they switch to manual labor. Hiraku leads a team of high elves, lizardmen, and horned demi-humans to clear the path alongside the river the normal way. They chop down trees with axes, dig up the earth with shovels, and carefully stack the heavy logs to build walls. Lasti watches them work and complains that it is incredibly boring, begging to just burn the trees down, but Hiraku firmly refuses to let her use fire. Meanwhile, back in the safety of the main village, Lu gives birth to a healthy baby boy named Alfred. The maids happily dote on the newborn, placing gifts like flowers and blue pendants in the room. Anne brings in a tiny blue and white ruffled shirt made by Zabaton. They note that the giant spider is as hasty as ever since the clothes are still way too big for the infant, but they appreciate the thoughtful gesture. With the forest finally cleared, the villagers begin constructing the second village specifically for Gordon and his people. Because the minotaurs are incredibly tall, they build spacious one-story homes with massive entryways and high ceiling. Inside, everything is scaled up to fit their frames. Hiraku inspects the giant wooden furniture, initially mistaking a massive chair for a dining table. They also construct custom beds using sturdy wooden platforms and small stools. Since regular beds would force the minotaurs to sleep uncomfortably, Hiraku designs special slots in the headboards so their large horns can rest safely without hitting the wood. Gordon tries out the new bed and immediately falls asleep, perfectly comfortable. Next, they move on to the third village to build homes for the centaurs. Given their lower horse bodies, Hiraku designs the houses to look and function like spacious stables. The buildings feature wide entrances, exposed wooden rafters, and large empty stalls. Gruwald notes that her people struggle to open standard doors, so Hiraku installs rope-pulled curtains instead. They also add heavy sliding panels for the centaurs to use during rainy days. Back in the main village, Lou holds a fussy baby Alfred, struggling to figure out why he is in such a bad mood. Anne steps in to help, making funny faces and playing peekaboo. Alfred immediately bursts into laughter. Lou is amazed and demands to know what Anne just did, but the maid playfully keeps it a secret. Sometime later, Alfred starts crying again. Hiraku lifts the baby into the air but quickly notices a terrible smell. Realizing the baby needs a diaper change, he immediately hands him back to Lou, prompting her to scold him for intentionally passing off the dirty work. A whole month passes, and the hard work pays off. The new villages are fully constructed just in time to keep everyone out of the incoming winter cold. Hiraku gathers with Lou, Tia, and the civil servant girls to officially name the settlements. Hiraku suggests names like Upton, Middleton, and Downton, but admits they don't sound quite right. He then suggests keeping things simple with Village 1, Village 2, and Village 3. The civil servant girls immediately agree, desperately wanting to avoid the nightmare of rewriting every single administrative document they have already filed. With the names settled, they move on to leadership. They officially appoint Gordon as the mayor of Village 2 and Gruwald as the mayor of Village 3. They briefly consider giving Hiraku a grander title like High Mayor, Great Mayor, or King Mayor to establish a clear hierarchy, but Hiraku gets embarrassed and shuts the idea down, preferring to just remain the village chief. Mam then approaches Hiraku and asks when they are going to build a village for the new Daphne. Hiraku apologizes and explains that they actually decided against building a dedicated village for the tree spirits. The new Daphne are more suited to staying in one place, so instead of clustering them together, Hiraku plans to place them at important locations around the area. This allows the tree spirits to use their natural telepathy to act as a communication network, relaying messages between the settlement. Since they emit a soft magical glow, they also serve as natural streetlights in the evening. The tree spirits are completely fine with this arrangement, and Hiraku even asks them to watch over the currently uninhabited Village 1 so it doesn't waste away. With housing settled, Hiraku tries to assign daily jobs to the new residents, starting with hunting. However, he immediately runs into a massive problem regarding food production. He originally expected the minotaurs and centaurs to hunt in the forest, but Gordon explains that minotaurs are a tranquil people, and most of them are completely unfit for combat. Likewise, the centaurs are mostly civilian refugees who cannot fend for themselves against the vicious monster. Hiraku watches a single-horned wolf easily slaughter a group of giant rabbit monsters and realizes he completely underestimated how difficult hunting actually is. The Great Tree Village only survived because Kuro's wolves and Zabuton's spiders are unimaginably strong and handled all the dangerous work. Realizing it is too dangerous to send the newcomers into the woods, Hiraku decides to strictly keep the minotaurs and centaurs out of combat. He asks Kuro and Zabuton to station more wolves and spiders in the new villages to serve as reliable defenders and hunters. Since hunting is out of the question, Hiraku decides to make the new villages entirely self-sufficient through farming. They clear large plots of land and till the soil, but after planting the seeds, absolutely nothing takes root. Hiraku asks the villagers what season they usually plant these seeds in, but no one actually knows. Hiraku is stunned to realize that none of them have any real farming knowledge. He quickly figures out the problem. For years, the Great Tree Village was able to harvest massive amounts of crops regardless of the weather or season, solely because of Hiraku's almighty farming tool. His magical hoe made the soil instantly fertile, allowed him to grow anything he imagined, and sped up the growth process exponentially. Because he is the only one who can wield the tool, the new villages have to farm the traditional way, and his own fields are already too massive for him to take on more work. Realizing they have to start from scratch, Gordon steps up to help. He has some basic farming experience from his old village and teaches the others how to lay thick layers of straw over the soil to keep the ground warm during the winter. They decide to plant winter wheat, which will sit through the cold months and be ready for harvest right before summer. Hiraku realizes that waiting half a year for a harvest is actually the norm, and his magical powers simply spoiled them. Grateful for his divine powers, Hiraku decides to build a small shrine. He carves 2 wooden statues representing the gods who helped him. One holds a stick to represent the god of creation, and the other represents the god of agriculture. The villagers admire the craftsmanship, though they find it funny that Hiraku carved the agriculture god to look like an old man, assuming it is just a different regional interpretation. With farming underway, the centaurs decide to utilize their incredible speed to start a delivery service between the villages. Since they are unfit for hunting but fast enough to outrun any monsters, the adult centaurs take on regular delivery routes, shipping wooden crates and barrels back and forth. They race through the forest, constantly trying to beat their own speed records. However, they sometimes run too fast and crash their wooden carts, sending their cargo flying. Hiraku watches the accidents and simply hopes they start putting safety first. Later, a centaur approaches Hiraku and mentions the normal horse that the merchant brought to the farm. Hiraku admits he has always wanted to ride a horse, but the animal completely ignores him. He brings a carrot to the black horse, but it stubbornly refuses to listen. Hiraku asks Gruwald to translate for him, but she flatly states that she does not speak horse. She helps him mount the animal anyway, and Hiraku sits behind Gruwald on the horse, holding onto her shoulders as they go for a bumpy ride through the forest. He enjoys his first time riding and accidentally touches Gruwald's long hair, prompting the horse to angrily spark with electric magic. On another day, Hiraku approaches the black horse again. This time, the animal is in a great mood and happily lets Hiraku pet it. Hiraku mounts the horse and takes it for a ride across the field. Gruwald secretly watches them from behind a cabin and gets incredibly jealous that the horse is suddenly cooperating. The next morning, Gruwald intercepts Hiraku on the path. She insists that the wild beast is far too dangerous for him to ride and angrily demands that he ride on her back instead. Hiraku points out that the horse is not even wild, but Gruwald stubbornly insists that he honor his word to be friends. To pacify her, Hiraku promises to alternate his rides, taking the horse one day and riding Gruwald the next. Elsewhere, Mam checks in on Igu and the new Daphne. She nervously asks if the tree spirit needs anything at all. Igu simply states that the sky is blue. Mam enthusiastically agrees that the weather is lovely, and Igu magically transforms her stump into a cute wooden creature, perfectly content with her new life. As the villages settle into a steady rhythm, Hiraku takes a break under a tree with Lou and baby Alfred. He admits he is worried about the massive influx of people. He hopes each village can eventually support itself, because relying too much on the convenience of his almighty farming tool makes him anxious about the future. If he ever gets sick with a cold, the entire food supply could collapse. Lou tells him to stop worrying so much, assuring him they can handle problems as they arise, and that he won't be retiring anytime soon anyway. Hiraku agrees to relax, but he still has one major concern. The Great Tree Village is completely overflowing with women, and there are barely any men. He initially hoped the arrival of the new refugees would fix the gender ratio, but he quickly hits a dead end. Gordon explains that minotaurs strictly marry other minotaurs because of their massive size, meaning none of them will pair up with the village women. Hiraku then asks Gruwald about the male centaurs. She reveals that while they have 30 males, they are all just young boys since the adult men were sent off to fight in the war. She also notes that centaurs rarely marry outside their race. Seeing Hiraku's distress over the situation, Gruwald boldly steps forward and declares that she is completely single. She assumes Hiraku wants to claim her as payment for letting them live in the village, and states she is fully prepared to serve him. Hiraku frantically waves his hands, denying that he wants anything like that. He asks who told her men enjoy overpowering strong women, begging her to relax. Gruwald completely misreads the situation, getting flustered and eagerly demanding to know if he would prefer her to be more contemptuous, leaving Hiraku to desperately try and calm her down. The story continues in the next video. Hit subscribe and stay tuned for more.